The coin sang against metal. It spun on the steel shelf inside the locker, a circle of dull brass catching the fluorescent light. Every time its edge clicked, the sound stacked on itself until it almost became something else. To Riley Hart, it sounded like rotor blades far away chopping air over a dark desert. She reached in and stopped it with 2 fingers. The coin was heavy, too heavy for its size. One side showed a wolf in profile fur, etched in sharp strokes, head lifted toward a thin crescent moon. The other side bore 3 words stamped so deep you could feel them with your eyes closed. Rescue at all costs. Riley closed her hand around the coin until the cool metal pressed into the scar tissue along her palm. The scars were pale now, ropey lines that ran from the base of her thumb toward her wrist. They used to burn whenever the weather changed. Tonight, under the humming lights of Rainport Mercy Medical Center, they were quiet. She slipped the coin back into its spot beside a folded photo and shut the locker. The locker room door swung open on a breath of cold air and disinfectant. Voices floated down the hall, thin and sharp, ricocheting off tile. Night shift again, someone groaned. Mercy's going to kill us before student loans do. Riley checked her watch. 11:58 p.m. Technically, her shift started at midnight. She had been there since 11:30. The emergency department waited beyond the double doors, a rectangle of bright light and hard edges. Monitor beeps, the squeak of sneakers on polished floor, the metallic clatter of a cart being pushed too fast. She tied her dark hair back tighter, adjusted the badge on her scrub top, and walked into the noise. The ER smelled like it always did at this hour. Alcohol wipes and sweat, old coffee and the faint copper trace of blood that never left completely, no matter how many times the floors were mopped. Bed 4 was hers. A man in his 60s lay there, hair yellowed with nicotine, beard tangled. His clothes were layered shirts that had all given up years ago. He clutched a plastic grocery bag to his chest, like it held something priceless. "Mr. Daly," Riley said softly. His eyes flicked open milky blue, trying to focus on her face. "Doc," he rasped. "You again." "Just a nurse," she said. "How's the chest pain?" "Only when I breathe." "That narrows it down." He snorted, which turned into a cough. Riley slid a hand under his back, steadying him while the cough shook him. Her fingers covered half his shoulder. Her grip was firm, unhurried. When he sagged back against the pillow, she was already reaching for the stethoscope around her neck. The metal disc felt cold through his threadbare shirt. She listened. She had listened to 1,000 hearts in this room under these lights. Some sounds were different. Some were exactly the same. Behind her, outside the curtain wheel, squeaked rubber, dragging over a sticky patch on the floor. A voice she recognized floated past. "Have you seen Hart, the quiet one? She took that chemical burn kid last week. Handled it like she was tying a shoe." "Yeah, well," another voice replied. "She'll die in this ER if she doesn't grow a spine. You have to push if you want the good cases." Riley pressed the stethoscope harder mostly so Mr. Daly would not see the way her jaw tightened. "Sounds better than last week," she said. "Still smoking." He looked guilty, like a child caught with a broken window. "Cutting down. On which day of the month?" "Tuesday," he said. "Sometimes Wednesday." She smiled small and real. "We'll work on Thursday." She finished her assessment, tightened the blood pressure cuff on his arm, taped down the IV they had placed earlier. Her hands moved with the efficient grace of someone who knew the route by muscle memory. Fingers checked the line palm, flattened the taped thumb, pressed just enough to feel the pulse underneath. Her hands never shook. The curtain popped open without warning. A young resident hair-gelled back tablet in hand poked his head in. "Hart, when you're done with him, I need you to turn over bed 6. We have a VIP transfer coming up from imaging." Riley glanced at Mr. Daly. "He's having active chest pain." The resident sighed, already stepping away. "Welcome to American healthcare," he said, half joking, half not. "Do your best, but clear 6. The curtain swung shut again. Mr. Daly watched her with a sideways kind of pity. "They run you ragged, girl." She shrugged. "Keeps me from getting bored." She finished with him, checked his oxygen, made a quick note in the computer. The keyboard clicked under her fingers. Each click seemed to echo the coin on the locker shelf, the rotor in her ear. Out at the nurse's station, monitors glowed in a row, casting pale rectangles on tired faces. Orders popped up on the screen. Labs pending. Admissions waiting upstairs that had no beds yet. A mother with a feverish toddler pacing and bouncing in plastic chairs. A drunk man arguing with security about why he needed a sandwich. Rainport Mercy had been built with glass and chrome and meaningful art on the walls. Behind it all sat an invisible column of numbers that decided how long people waited, which patients were profitable, which ones were not. In a conference room on the mezzanine floor above the ER, those numbers were on a screen. Dr. Aaron Klein clicked to the next slide. Graphs shifted, lines climbed, a neat blue bar chart glowed against a white background. "Our door-to-doc time is down by 12%, he said. less time wasted on non-billable social admits. Across the table, Leonard Briggs watched with hooded eyes. Briggs wore a tailored gray suit and a tie patterned with small anchors. He had never worked a code in his life. His world was spreadsheets and malpractice claims and the word growth. The board likes those numbers, Briggs said. Shorter stays fewer charity waivers. Klein smiled but tried to make it look modest. We tightened the intake criteria, redirected the worst offenders to county. We can keep this trend going. And the staff, Briggs asked. Any pushback? Some grumbling, Klein said. They'll adjust. They always adjust. He did not mention Riley Hart by name. He barely registered her as more than part of the machinery that made his slides possible. Downstairs, the machinery was improvising. A boy of 6 lay on a gurney in bed, 2 eyes wild drool, shining at the corner of his mouth. His mother clutched his hand fingers, white knuckles sharp. He drank it, she stammered. The blue stuff under the sink. I thought it was locked. The attending physician stood frozen at the foot of the bed, torn between the severity of the scenario and the fear of tubing a child without backup. The air around the boy whistled, his throat swelling each breath a narrow passage. Riley stepped into the room. Her eyes took in the bottle clutched in the mother's other hand, the chemical brand, the boy's color, the way his chest heaved. What's his name? Riley asked. Caleb. Okay, Caleb, she said, voice gentling. I know it's hard to breathe. I am going to help with that. The attending looked at her. Resp is on their way. His airway will not wait, Riley answered. She moved before he could argue. One hand slid under the boy's head, stabilizing the neck, aligning the spine the way she had been taught in sand and dust instead of tile and vinyl. The other hand reached for the laryngoscope already laid out but untouched. Metal smooth and cold. Her palm closed around it with an ease that had nothing to do with this hospital. Bag, she said, suction ready. A tech scrambled to place the bag valve mask. A nurse fumbled the suction tubing into its port. The light on the scope clicked on. Riley eased the blade into Caleb's mouth, mind narrowing to color and shape. Pink tissue. Swollen folds. A glint of vocal cords behind the swelling. Her hands did not think, they remembered. The tube slid through. She felt the ring of cartilage, the slight give, the resistance. She signaled. Tube in, bag him. Air rushed. The horrible high-pitched whistle faded. The room exhaled. A second later, the attending found his voice. Good work, he said loudly. I was just about to do that. He stepped into Riley's line of sight, blocking the mother's tear-bright eyes. Write in the note that I directed the procedure. Riley peeled off her gloves. The snap of latex sounded louder than it should have. Whatever you want in the note, doctor, she said. He is breathing. That is what matters. She left before the argument could start. At the nurse's station, 2 interns whispered over a stack of charts. Did you see Hart in there? She moves like she has a script no one else got. Yeah, but she never speaks up. Lets Klein and the others take credit. I don't get it. Maybe she has no life outside this place. Maybe she has no life at all. They laughed quietly, the nervous edge of people who sensed something they could not name. Riley walked past them on her way to linens. She did not slow down. She did not speed up. She picked up a fresh stack of blankets, the cotton still warm from the dryer, and carried them back to replace what they had used. In the break room, a television played a muted newsreel of some conflict on the other side of the world. Dust, smoke, brown faces lit by flame. The caption scrolled, Joint Special Operations Coalition campaign continues. Someone had left a half-eaten sandwich on the table. The smell of mayonnaise had gone sour. A coffee machine burbled in the corner. Its pump whined in a rhythm that did not quite match the flash of images on the screen, but Riley could have sworn she heard a helicopter in it anyway. She turned the TV off. Alone for a moment, she stood under the hum of the fluorescent lights and looked down at her hands. The scars around her thumbs were white against the darker skin of her knuckles. There were faint round marks on the backs of her fingers where something had burned her through gloves years ago. If anyone asked, she said they were from a childhood kitchen accident. No one had ever asked twice. Back in the locker room, the folded photo waited behind the coin. 8 figures stood in a row on some unnamed rooftop. They wore gear that did not officially exist. Every face had been crossed out with thick black ink lines, hard enough to tear the paper in places. Only one face remained untouched. A younger Riley, eyes tired but smiling like she had not yet imagined places with soft chairs. Under the picture, in a cramped hand that never quite lost the grit of dirt and chalk, someone had written, Shadow Company, no one left behind. Riley opened her locker long enough to check that the photo was still there. She considered taking it out. She left it. It was 1:10 in the morning when the rain began to hit the windows sideways. The first wave of the night shift crisis started as it always did. A minor car accident, a bar fight, A fall down some apartment stairs. The waiting room filled in slow motion. The air thickened with wet wool coats and cheap cologne. At the triage desk, a nurse called out names. A toddler screamed inconsolably. A teenager stared at his bloody knuckles like he did not recognize them. Riley moved among the beds, starting IVs, hanging bags, reassuring, repositioning. She slipped into rooms where tempers were high and voices were sharp, and somehow the tone dropped a notch when she was there. She spoke low and even. She did not waste words. Outside, the storm gathered over Rainport, pushing the clouds low, pressing the city flat. Somewhere on the interstate beyond the glow of the hospital sign, and the neat square of its manicured lawn headlights cut through sheets of rain. Inside, the ER monitors kept beeping unbothered by weather. Riley checked a vital screen, noted the trend, and turned toward the sound of approaching wheels. The night was just getting started. The first siren hit around 2 a.m. It cut through the hum of the ER, a rising wail that grew louder until it scraped at the windows. Then another chasing it, then a third. The sound folded over itself and turned into one long scream in the wet dark outside. At triage, the phone lit up. The nurse on duty pressed it to her ear, listened, and went very still. She glanced at the paramedic radio, already crackling with voices. "Pile up on I-5, choke off on weaves, oh," she called toward the nurse's station. "Multiple vehicles, heavy rain, they are bringing everyone here." A low ripple moved through the department. The kind of ripple that meant no one was going home on time. No one said it out loud. They did what they always did. Tightened ponytails, pulled on fresh gloves, switched out nearly empty saline bags so they would not have to do it in the middle of a code. Riley checked the board. Beds lit red, yellow, green. Too many red, not enough anything. A doctor muttered, "Here we go," and tossed his empty coffee cup into the trash. It bounced off the rim and fell to the floor. Riley bent to pick it up before it rolled under the crash cart. He said a quick thanks and was already moving away. The first ambulance doors burst open a minute later, then the next. Wet gurney wheels squealed on the ramp, voices overlapped. Age mechanism of injury vitals shouted into the rain. Seatbelt positive, thrown from vehicle possible internal bleed. Unrestrained driver head through windshield. Riley slipped into the current without thinking. A girl with glass in her hair and a gash across her cheek. A man whose sternum had kissed the steering wheel. A teenage boy who joked through a trembling jaw while she probed along his ribs. The room filled with the smells of rain-soaked clothing, coolant, burned rubber. The monitors complained about low pressures, high heart rates. Someone called for respiratory in bed 3. Someone else asked for another crash cart. Under it all, the storm pressed its full weight against the hospital windows. By the time the first wave settled into a pattern of urgent activity instead of pure chaos, the department felt stretched thin. Every bed held a body. The hallway held more. Riley stepped away from a little girl whose arm she had just splinted, checked that the sling was snug but not tight, and smiled down at her. "You are braver than most grown-ups I know," she said. The girl sniffed. "My dad says that too. Your dad is smart." The girl attempted a watery smile. Riley tugged the blanket up to the girl's chin, patted her shoulder, and turned when she heard a change in the noise near the back entrance. It was not louder than everything else, it was just different. 2 men in jeans and dark jackets pushed through the staff entrance, their shoes leaving muddy water on the tile. Between them, they half-carried, half-dragged a man in shredded tactical gear. His boots scraped the floor, leaving streaks of rain and blood. "Need a hand over here," one of them called, voice hoarse. The closest nurse glanced up from her monitor, saw the camouflage, the body armor, the smeared dirt, and hesitated. "We came from outside city limits," the man explained quickly. "Back road, bad connection. He is force recon. There was an incident at the range. He needs a chest doctor now." The words fell apart at the edges. His focus was on the weight in his hands. The man between them tried to speak. A sound like gravel scraped out of his chest and died halfway. Riley was already moving. She reached them at the same moment Dr. Klein turned the corner from the central station tablet hugged to his chest. His hair was still perfect. His irritation was already visible. "What is this doing in my hallway?" he demanded. "Staff Sergeant Diego Morales," one of the men said, thrusting a worn military ID toward him with his free hand. "He took some kind of blast. He is bleeding into his chest. There was no time to call ahead." Klein took the ID, gave it a glance that lasted less than a second, and looked at the man instead. The man was pale under the dirt. His shirt had been cut away in places to reveal a chest soaked in darkening red. Blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth when he tried to breathe. Riley saw the way his ribs fought for space, the way one side of his chest lagged behind the other. Her mind gave the answer before anyone spoke. Tension in the chest. Air trapped where it did not belong. Pressure building. "Where is his insurance?" Klein asked. Both contractors stared at him. One blinked rain out of his eyelashes. He is a Marine, the man said. We grabbed him and drove. The others are still out there. We will sort paperwork after. He is going gray. We are at a capacity, Klein said. His voice went flatter, more precise, like he was reading from a policy manual. We have no transfer forms. This is not a VA facility. You cannot just dump an unstable patient here. Riley stepped around him, eyes fixed on the Marine's chest. His trachea, she said quietly. Look. The contractors were too close to see. Klein did not bother to look. Riley saw the subtle shift of the windpipe under the skin tug just off center. She saw the veins in his neck swell with each shallow breath. He has no time for an ethics consult, she said. Klein moved to block her path. The trauma team is in 3 active cases, he snapped. You do not touch him until we decide on placement. The Marine's lips had taken on a faint blue tint. His pupils were blown wider than the room could explain. Riley smelled the iron in his blood, and something burned underneath it like explosives and sweat baked into fabric. For a fraction of a moment, the ER hallway blurred. In its place stood a narrow street of broken concrete under a sagging power line. A burned-out truck. Gunfire somewhere close. A man in similar gear gasping on a dusty floor. Gray, someone shouted in her head. We are losing him now. Her heart gave one hard thud against her ribs. The fluorescent light snapped her back. The cart of supplies stood 6 steps away. The man in front of her was real. His breath was getting more ragged with each second. The numbers on the nearest monitor told a story that did not care about budgets. Riley, Klein said, voice dropping, if you touch this patient, you are on your own. I will document every violation. She met his eyes. His anger came from fear and pride in the thin line of authority he thought would protect him. Noted, she said. Her palm hit his chest not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to move him out of the way. Surprise knocked him off balance more than the push. His back clipped the edge of a supply cabinet, sending a tray of syringes rattling. Gasps went up from 3 places at once. Someone said her name in a shocked tone. Riley did not look back. Get him on a gurney, she told the contractors. They obeyed instantly. They had followed orders in worse places. She grabbed the nearest rolling stretcher, swung it parallel, and together they heaved the Marine onto it. The motion sent a fresh surge of blood from under the torn fabric at his side, a brief arc that splashed warm on her glove. Vitals, she snapped. A nurse stumbled forward, slapped a pulse oximeter on his finger cuff on his arm. The machine blinked awake and began to pump. Riley did not wait for the numbers to print on the screen. She stripped the remaining gear from his chest with quick, brutal motions. Velcro ripped. Buckles slammed against metal. Underneath the vest, his undershirt stuck to his skin in dark red fans that radiated from a jagged tear near his upper ribs. His breathing sounded like air trying to force its way through cotton. Each inhale was a battle. 14-gauge needle, she said. At least 2 inches. Alcohol swab. I need it now. No one moved. The room seemed to freeze around the shape of what she had done to Klein. Staff glanced at one another, at him, at the contractors, waiting to see whose rules mattered. Riley turned eyes sharp. Then I will get it myself. She crossed the 6 steps to the nearest crash cart in 3 strides and snapped the drawer open. Medication syringes, IV access neatly arranged. She went straight to the row of large bore needles, fingers choosing the right length by feel. Her hands remembered. The battlefield had different carts, but the same math. Back at the gurney, she did not bother to ask anyone to swab the skin. She tore an alcohol wipe. The smell hit her nose in a clean, sharp burst as she scrubbed the spot just below the collarbone at the second rib line along an invisible path drawn between throat and shoulder. Hold him still, she said. The contractors pinned the Marine's shoulders. Riley did not pause to think about liability forms or committees or the words that would be written tomorrow. She thought about lungs filling with air instead of blood. She felt along the ribs with 2 fingers counting in her head. The spot announced itself like it always did, a small target under too much pressure. She drove the needle in. There was resistance, then a give, like piercing the top of a thick plastic water bottle. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a rush. Trapped air exploded from the hub of the needle with a hiss that cut through the surrounding noise. The pressure change ran up the metal into her hand. Someone swore under their breath. The oximeter beeped faster, then steadier. The Marine dragged in a breath so deep it lifted his entire chest. Color crawled back into his lips in slow motion. His eyes fluttered open. For a moment he looked lost. The ceiling above him was white instead of blackened. The faces around him wore scrubs instead of armor. The alarm sounds were hospital machines rather than radios. Then his gaze found Riley. She leaned in close, both hands still on the makeshift stabilization she had improvised with folded towels and gauze. Her ponytail had come loose at the base of her neck, a few strands stuck to her cheek with sweat. You are okay, she said. Stay with me. He stared at her like he had seen a ghost. Gray wolf, he rasped. The words scraped over damaged tissue but came out clear. It is you. Riley froze for half a second. No one else reacted. The contractors were too focused on keeping him from rolling. The nurse on his left did not know what those words meant. To them, it was just nonsense from a man in shock. To her, it was the past spoken out loud in a room that should never have heard it. Her face gave nothing away. Do not try to talk, she said. Save your air. His hand twitched toward her fingers, grazing her wrist, where the scar tissue climbed toward her thumb. Recognition flickered again in his eyes. Relief followed. Then, a bone-deep exhaustion took him and his eyelids sagged. Pressure is up, the nurse said, quietly reading the numbers finally appearing on the monitor. Oxygen sat is coming back. Dr. Klein found his footing and his voice at the same time. You assaulted me, he shouted. His words hit the far walls and bounced back. You put a needle in his chest without an attending order. You just opened us to a lawsuit that will shut this place down. The nearby staff pulled back like someone had broken a glass bottle on the floor. Riley did not look at him. She kept her eyes on the line of the Marine's neck, watching the veins. The subtle tug of his trachea had eased. His breaths came easier, still shallow, but no longer frantic. We need a surgical consult, she said calmly. Page trauma, call CT, prepare for blood. She spoke to the air-not to Klein. The charge nurse, finally snapping out of paralysis, reached for the phone. Klein stepped closer, face flushed. I am calling security, he said, jabbing a finger at Riley. You are done here. You hear me? Done. Riley leaned closer to the Marine's ear, ignoring the heat at her back. You are going to the operating room, she told him quietly. Hold your line. You made it this far. His eyes flickered in acknowledgement. By the time the surgical team arrived, Riley already had 2 units of O-negative hanging. She gave a concise clinical report hitting all the points the way they liked to hear them. Penetrating trauma to the right chest, suspected tension pneumothorax, decompression performed, immediate improvement in oxygenation and hemodynamics, possible associated vascular injury. The trauma surgeon, a woman with sleep lines on her cheek and sharp eyes, glanced from the needle in the Marine's chest to Riley's face. Who did the decompression? She asked. I did, Riley answered. The surgeon held her gaze for a moment. There was no admiration or condemnation there, only calculation. Good call, she said. We will take it from here. They rolled the Marine away with a practiced flurry of hands. The doors to the operating room swung shut behind him. Silence did not fall in the ER, but a pocket of it formed around Riley. Security appeared at Klein's summons. 2 guards in dark uniforms with radios at their shoulders looked between him and Riley as if trying to decide who posed more danger. Escort Nurse Hart to the director's office, Klein said. His voice had settled into something cold and precise now that he had an audience. She just committed gross insubordination and battery on a supervising physician. I am filing immediate incident reports. One of the guards cleared his throat. Sir, we saw her save that guy. Klein turned on him. And when his family sues, will you be paying the damages? The guard dropped his gaze. Riley removed her gloves. The blood on them was already darkening. She dropped them into the biohazard bin, then wiped a faint smear from her wrist with an alcohol pad. The familiar sting steadied her. I have patience, she said. Not anymore, Klein snapped. The charge nurse tried to catch her eye. There was apology there, also fear. Riley nodded once as if someone had simply reminded her of a meeting she had forgotten about. Then she walked between the 2 security guards without being touched her steps as even as when she had walked out to meet the first ambulance. The director's office sat on a higher floor with a view of the city lights smeared by rain. The carpet was thick enough to muffle every sound, which made the conversation inside feel even louder. Leonard Briggs sat behind his desk with a folder open in front of him. The folder had her name on the tab. He did not invite her to sit. Nurse Hart, he began, it has been a busy night. Yes, Riley said. He folded his hands over the papers. I have reviewed Dr. Klein's report, he continued. You put your hands on a supervising physician. You intervened in a case outside your scope without authorization. You performed an invasive procedure that carries significant risk. You did this while the department was already under strain. Staff Sergeant Morales would have died, Riley said. Her voice was calm, not defensive, simply stating something she considered as obvious as the color of the walls. Briggs exhaled through his nose. I am not a clinician, he said. You are, said. My job is to protect this institution. From financial collapse, from legal action, from bad press. We have policies. We have chains of command. They exist for a reason. He tapped the folder lightly. When any one person decides they are above those structures, they become a danger. To who? She asked. To the hospital, or to the people who come here because they think we will treat them before checking their wallets. His mouth tightened. You are an employee, he said. You do not dictate policy, you follow it. He slid a paper from the folder and turned it so it faced her. Effective immediately, your employment at Rainport Mercy Medical Center is terminated, he read. Cause listed as repeated insubordination, unsafe practice, and assault of a supervising physician. The words unfolded in the air between them like a thin white flag. Riley looked at the page not because she needed to read it, but because not looking would have felt like running. Understood, she said. You will be escorted to collect your personal belongings, Briggs went on. Your access card will be deactivated upon exit. You will not return to the emergency department floor in a clinical capacity. He sounded almost bored, as if saying these lines was part of a checklist he had gone through many times with other names and other faces. If Staff Sergeant Morales had died, he added, we would be in an even worse position. Riley thought of the hiss of air leaving his chest through the needle, the way his eyes had cleared just enough to find hers, the way he had said a name she had buried deep. He did not, she said. Briggs gave a thin smile that did not reach his eyes. That is fortunate for everyone, Ahoy said, but it does not erase what you did. There was nothing else to say. The same guard from before walked her back to the locker room. This time his radio chatter was the loudest sound between them. Inside her locker, her world had already been compressed into what could fit in a canvas bag. Spare scrubs, a pair of worn sneakers, a paperback with a cracked spine, a travel-sized bottle of unscented lotion. The coin sat exactly where she had left it. She wrapped her fingers around it and felt the familiar weight settle into her palm. It was warmer than the steel of the locker shelf, or maybe her hand was just colder than she realized. When she pulled her hand back, something small and folded slipped out from behind the edge of the shelf and fluttered to the floor. She bent to pick it up. It was a scrap of paper torn from some larger form. A dark smear of dried blood marked one corner. The handwriting across the center was rough and slanted as if written by someone lying on his back. If I make it, I will find you. DM. She stared at the letters until they blurred. Somewhere above her on the surgical floor, machines were breathing for Staff Sergeant Diego Morales. People who had not been at that hallway gurney would be stitching and clamping and suturing. They would read numbers and scans and chart notes. They would never know why his lungs had a chance to keep moving. Riley folded the paper carefully and slid it into her wallet behind her license. The coin went into the pocket of her jacket, heavy against her hip. When she stepped out into the back corridor, the storm had quieted. The rain had thinned into a steady mist soft against the glass doors. The glow from the parking lot lights painted wet streaks on the pavement. She handed her badge to the guard at the exit. It clicked on the counter when he set it aside. A small sound. Not much louder than a coin landing on steel. The city did not look different the next day, but it felt like it was holding its breath. Morning light sat low over Rainport, filtered through a sheet of gray cloud. The rain had thinned to a drizzle that left small circles on car roofs and made the pavement shine. A line of people stood outside a coffee shop near the hospital, hands wrapped around paper cups, faces turned toward their phones. Riley walked past them with her canvas bag over her shoulder and her jacket zipped to her throat. Her badge was gone. Her neck felt bare without its weight. She had not slept much. The hours since the night shift had been a blur of kitchen table silence and the sound of rain on the small apartment window. At some point, she had taken the coin out of her pocket and set it on the table. It had watched her in its silent way until she picked it up again. Now it rested in her jacket pocket, pressing against her hip with each step. The sign above the main entrance to Rainport Mercy glowed white and clean. From this angle, the building could have been an office tower. The glass reflected the low sky and the leafless trees in the parking lot. She walked through the sliding doors like any visitor. The lobby smelled of polished floors and weak coffee. A fountain burbled in one corner, water sliding over a stone wall lit from beneath. The sound made a thin attempt at calm. Behind the information desk, a woman in a navy blazer looked up. Her smile was automatic until she focused on Riley's face. The smile faltered. "You are back," the woman said. "I have to sign some exit paperwork," Riley answered. "HR asked me to come in." The woman nodded and pointed toward a bank of elevators. "Third floor, human resources." The elevator ride took less than a minute. It felt longer. Riley watched her own reflection in the metal panel, the fluorescent light bleaching her skin a shade paler than usual. Without scrubs, she looked like anyone. Dark hair pulled back, plain jacket, eyes that did not give much away. HR took half an hour. Form signatures, a pamphlet about benefits that no longer applied. The woman across the desk spoke in gentle tones as if Riley might break. Riley listened, answered when needed, and did not break. On the way back down, the elevator stopped on the second floor. A nurse in pediatrics blue stepped in carrying a bundle of charts. She did a double take when she saw Riley. "I heard," she said quietly, "about last night." Riley glanced at the charts. She recognized one of the names scribbled on the top folder, a child with asthma who had come through the ER 3 times in 2 months. "How is Caleb?" she asked. "Breathing, sure," the nurse said. "His mom keeps asking who put in the tube. She wants to say thank you." Riley nodded. "Tell her a team did," she said. The elevator doors opened. They stepped into the second-floor corridor. The nurse hesitated, then touched Riley's arm. "You should not be the one leaving," she said. "Sometimes people say what they wish were true. Sometimes they say what has been waiting on their tongue for longer than they realize." Riley heard both in the woman's voice. She gave her a small smile. "Take good care of them," she said. "That is what matters." She took the stairs down the last flight. The ground-floor corridor that led to the back exit was quieter than the front lobby. Fewer families, more staff. The air smelled of hand sanitizer and the faint sting of surgical prep. People coming the other way made small adjustments when they saw her. A tilt of the head, a flicker of recognition in the eyes. Some offered a quick nod. Others suddenly found their attention fixed on the floor or the papers in their hands. News traveled fast in hospitals, stories traveled even faster. At the back doors, she paused. 2 days ago, she had stood here soaked with rain and adrenaline watching a Marine bleed on the hallway tile. Last night, she had walked out as someone who no longer belonged. She pushed the door open. Outside the hospital's rear lot stretched out in a flat gray field of asphalt and painted lines. Beyond it, the manicured lawn wrapped around the building, trimmed bushes, and a flagpole rustling in the damp breeze. She stepped onto the concrete, zipped her jacket a little higher, and moved along the path toward the side gate. The air changed. It happened gradually. A low vibration in the soles of her feet, a soft rattle in the glass beside her. The sound slid in under the normal noise of the city, a deep, steady beat that grew in her chest before it reached her ears. Her hand went automatically to her pocket. Her fingers closed around the coin. The vibration sharpened into a recognizable rhythm. Rotor blades. Riley turned. At first, there was only sky and shifting cloud. Then, the helicopter broke through a dark shape sweeping over the hospital's far side. It came in low and fast, the sound swelling until it filled everything. Leaves tore from trees. Small branches shuddered. The hospital's security alarms began to shriek. The sound mesh of sirens and rotor wash turned the air into something solid. An overhead speaker crackled to life inside the building. "Code external," a voice said tight. "All staff, please move away from exterior windows. This is not a drill." People pressed against those same windows anyway. Riley watched the helicopter tilt and flare as it approached the front lawn. The paint on its skin was a matte, dark gray light, swallowing instead of reflecting. The words, United States Navy, curved along its side in sharp white letters. Below them sat a crest she recognized without wanting to. A trident, a pistol, an anchor, wings. Naval Special Warfare. The Seahawk hovered for a second above the manicured grass, then dropped. The ground shuddered when the skids touched. Rotor wash flattened the bushes. Papers whipped along the sidewalk like startled birds. The side door of the aircraft slid open. 8 figures stepped out one after another, moving with a precision that belonged in other countries and other kinds of the nights. They wore helmets with dark visors, vests heavy with gear weapons resting in their hands at low ready. They formed 2 lines without speaking and advanced toward the main entrance. Riley stood in the angle between the rear and side of the building, half in shadow, watching. Her heart did not race. It simply became very present, each beat a clear knock in her chest. Inside the lobby, people had flooded toward the glass drawn by the noise. Nurses in scrub tops, doctors half in their coats, visitors clutching tote bags, a child with a balloon string wrapped around his wrist. The automatic doors at the front opened on the blast of air. The leading operator stepped through it as if stepping onto a range. His helmet visor reflected the white floor. On his chest sat the rank insignia of a lieutenant commander. He stripped the helmet off with one hand. His hair was cut close to the scalp, streaked at the temples. His eyes were a pale, flat blue, hard, not from cruelty, but from too much clarity. He took in the lobby with one sweep and spoke over the lingering thunder of the rotors. "We are looking for Riley Hart," he called. "Immediate contact, no delay." No one moved at first. The name hung there. Then heads turned almost in unison toward the interior corridor that led to the ER, toward the stairs, toward anywhere she had been seen most often. In that moment, the hospital remembered exactly who it had just let walk out. Riley did not step forward. Not yet. She watched through the side of the lobby window, unseen by most of the crowd. The glass caught her reflection overlaid with the scene inside. Her face looked calm. The rest of her felt like it was standing in a doorway between 2 very different rooms. She saw Dr. Klein near the nurse's station, half hidden behind a monitor. His mouth had slipped open. He looked younger without his confidence. Leonard Briggs stood near the reception desk, tie, slightly crooked hands at his sides. His eyes had gone wide in a way they never did in meetings. The color had drained from his face so that his features looked drawn in chalk. The lieutenant commander let the silence stretch for one measured breath, then another. He spoke again, voice lower but caring. Riley Hart here, say Hawaii said. Grey Wolf, present yourself. The name had not sounded in her ears for a long time. Not like that. Not said by someone who had earned the right. Something in her chest let go. She stepped out from the side corridor into the lobby. The air changed again when people saw her. Conversations broke off mid-word. Even the nearest monitor seemed to quiet. She walked through the gathered staff, the visitors, the volunteers in their color-coded vests. No one reached out to stop her. A path opened without being asked. The coin in her pocket felt hot now, as if it had been waiting for this noise, this air. She stopped 3 paces from the lieutenant commander. Up close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the stubble on his jaw that said he had not slept properly in too long. His gaze fixed on her with the focus of a man who had spent years differentiating between friend and enemy in dark, crowded spaces. He did something no one in that hospital had ever done. He snapped to attention. Commander Hart, he said, Me, sir, he said, ma'am. The lobby seemed to tilt. Behind her, she heard someone choke on a breath. A nurse whispered, Commander, like she was testing a word from a different language. Riley felt every eye in the room on her back. I am not a commander, she said quietly, not here. The corner of his mouth twitched as if he knew what she meant and disagreed. With respect, he said, your rank did not disappear when you put on scrubs. He shifted his rifle to a safer angle and lowered his voice a notch. It still carried. We are here on behalf of Staff Sergeant Diego Morales, he said. He requested contact with you upon regaining consciousness. Riley's shoulders eased a fraction. He is awake, she said. As of 1 hour ago, the commander answered. He confirmed your identity. He referred to you by call sign. He stated that without you, he would not be alive. The words fell clean, no embellishment. Briggs found his voice. Excuse me, he said, stepping forward. There has been some kind of misunderstanding. Nurse Hart was let go last night. She is a nurse. She is not military. The lieutenant commander turned his head slowly toward him. With the helmet off, there was nothing between his expression and the director's face. When I was told to come to this address, he said, I was told I would find Grey Wolf, the last operational combat medic of Shadow Company, the operator who pulled 22 men out of an urban kill zone under active fire during Operation Black Lantern. He looked back at Riley. Were we told wrong, ma'am? The room felt too small. The fountain in the corner kept running as ridiculous as a ringtone in a funeral parlor. Riley thought of that rooftop in a city whose name never made the news. The dust stuck to sweat, the weight of another body over her shoulder, the coin in her pocket then pressing into her leg with every step as she moved from one bleeding shape to the next. Shadow Company, no one left behind. She lifted her chin. No, she said, you were not told wrong. Something like a sigh moved through the lobby. Shock, fear, a strange current of pride that had nowhere safe to land. Near the back, one of the security guards who had walked her out the night before stared at her like he had never seen her before. Maybe he had not. Dr. Klein took a step forward. His voice shook despite his effort to hold it steady. You are some kind of special forces? He asked. This is crazy. If that is true, why are you a nurse here? Riley turned her head enough to look at him. Because people bleed in both places, she said. Only here they do it with less noise. His face worked around an answer that did not arrive. The commander reached into a pocket on his vest and took out a small pouch sealed in clear plastic. Inside lay a fabric patch identical to the symbol on Riley's coin, a wolfen profile thread, dark against lighter cloth head, raised toward a thin crescent shape. He broke the seal and held it out to her. From Staff Sergeant Morales, he said. He said you lost yours. Her fingers brushed his gloved hand as she took it. The fabric felt rough against her skin, familiar and unwelcome at the same time. Behind him, the operators in their 2 neat lines waited without fidgeting. Their presence filled the room without any raised voices. Briggs swallowed. Nurse Hart, he said. The title sounded small now. Why did you never disclose this background? There are procedures for military service records. Riley glanced at him. Would it have changed how you saw me? She asked. He opened his mouth and closed it again. The truth lay bare in his silence. The commander did not rescue him. We have orders, he said instead, from above my pay grade, to offer you full escort and honors, to bring you to Morales, to provide whatever resources you require. He paused, then added quieter for her alone. They told me to tell you this was not optional. A flicker of dry humor crossed her eyes. They should know better, she said. Nothing has ever been less optional for me. He held her gaze. In that shared look were sandbags, briefing tents, the sound of generators at dawn, the particular taste of dust when you have been awake for 30 hours straight. "Will you come with us?" he asked, to see him. The question was simple. The answer was simpler. "Yes," she said. He stepped back half a pace, enough to mark a shift. The operators behind him moved in unison, boots thudding once as they came to attention. As Riley passed between them toward the doors, they raised their hands in a crisp salute, palms sharp, shoulders square. The gesture rolled through the lobby like a wave. Staff who had scolded her for moving too fast. Residents who had forgotten to say thank you. Administrators who had only ever seen her as a name on a staffing grid. They all stood still and watched the military formation honor the woman they had treated as background. Outside, the rotors still spun the blades a blur. The wind they kicked up tugged at Riley's jacket and loose strands of her hair as she stepped onto the concrete. The commander walked at her side just close enough that she could hear him over the engine. "When we are done here," he said, "they will not forget your name again." She did not answer. Her focus settled on the open door of the Seahawk. The interior smelled of oil and metal and the ghosts of old missions. A crew chief reached a hand toward her. She took it and climbed aboard. The helmet from years ago was not on her head. The pack was not on her shoulders. She had a canvas bag and a coin and a patch in her hand. As the helicopter lifted, the hospital dropped away beneath them, a square of glass and concrete and carefully trimmed grass. The fountain in the front courtyard sent up its small arc of water, oblivious to the dust that had just been kicked across its surface. From this height, the emergency department entrance looked like a thin slit of light in the side of the building. Riley watched it shrink through the open hatch. Her hands rested on her knees. The scars on her knuckles caught the gray light that filtered in. The rotors beat overhead steady and relentless, the same sound that had chased her all night in her memory. Now it was everywhere in the air and in her bones. The coin in her pocket hummed with it. The helicopter rode the air like something that had done this too many times. Inside the cabin, the world narrowed to vibration and noise. The rotors hammered above them, turning the air into a steady weight that pushed against Riley's chest and teeth. Loose straps trembled on their buckles. A red light near the rear door blinked a slow pulse. She sat on the bench opposite the open hatch, strapped in canvas bag at her feet. Across from her, the operators sat in a row, shoulders squared, eyes forward. Faces hidden behind goggles and chin straps again. They had switched back into their usual armor, the short pause in the lobby already filed away. The lieutenant commander sat beside the hatch, one hand on the frame headset clamped over his ears. His mouth moved with words Riley could not hear, until he leaned toward her and tapped the spare headset at her side. She slipped it on. The roar dimmed into a lower thrum. "You all right, ma'am?" His voice came through tinny but clear. "I have had quieter rides," she said. He gave a brief huff that might have been a laugh. 6 minutes to base," he said. "They stabilized him. He had a rough time under the knife, but he is holding. You bought him a margin." The cabin light caught the patch in her hand. She had not put it away yet. The wolf's stitched eye stared back at her. "He bought me one once," she said. The commander nodded, eyes on her face. "I read pieces of the after-action gray. They blacked out half the paragraphs." "They always black out the fun parts," she said. Outside, the city slid past in fragments between clouds. Rows of houses. A freeway like a river of metal. Warehouses with flat roofs shining under moisture. He studied her for a moment longer. "They told me you died," he said, 7 years ago. "That was the idea," she answered. Her fingers closed more firmly around the patch. He looked as if he wanted to ask why. Then he seemed to change his mind. The pilot's voice crackled into their ears. Descending, approach vector approved, wind steady. The base rose up underneath them, a rectangle carved out of the city. Chain-link fence topped with angled wire. A runway glistening with water. Low buildings painted in dull colors that blended with the weather. A small red cross on one of them. The Seahawk tilted, flared, and dropped onto a square of painted tarmac near the medical wing. Rotor wash kicked up spray and the sharp scent of jet fuel. Crew pulled the door wider. The red cabin light switched to green. "Welcome back to the neighborhood," the commander said. She unbuckled, grabbed her bag, and climbed out, ducking instinctively under blades that were far above her head. Rain hit her face in small cold flecks. A pair of corpsmen waited at the edge of the pad poncho, snapping around them. They led the way toward the medical building at a quick walk. Inside, the air changed from wet and sharp to dry and chemical. The floors were clean enough to reflect overhead lights. Signs directed traffic in tidy block letters, to ICU, to radiology, to security. At the end of a corridor that smelled strongly of antiseptic and new paint, 2 Marines stood guard outside a set of double doors. Their uniforms were pressed boots, polished rifles at rest against their chests. Their eyes snapped to attention when they saw the lieutenant commander. Then they clocked Riley at his side and straightened even more. "Ma'am," one said. Is he awake? Riley asked. As of 15 minutes ago, the Marine answered. Doc said short visits. The commander glanced at her. You go in first, he said. We will give you a minute. Riley pushed at the door with her palm. The ICU room beyond was bright and quiet, its noises small. A ventilator exhaled in a steady rhythm without needing to push air anymore. A monitor traced green lines over a black screen, numbers glowing at regular intervals. Clear bags hung on metal poles, fluid dripping in controlled slow drops. Staff Sergeant Diego Morales lay in the bed, elevated, slightly wide shoulders, shrinking under the thin blanket. Tubes ran from his arms. Dressings wrapped his chest tape pale against his skin. A nasal cannula curved under his nose instead of a tube down his throat. His eyes were open. They tracked slowly from the window to the door as she entered. Focus slid over her, then sharpened. He tried to get his right hand up. The action pulled against stitches and tubing. His face tightened with pain. She closed the distance in 2 steps and caught his wrist before he could complete the salute. None of that, she said. You start ripping lines and they will kick me out. He blew out a breath that was half laugh, half grimace. You came, he said. You made a lot of noise, she replied, hard to ignore. His voice was rough but stronger than in the ER. The gravel had settled into something more steady. I was not sure it was really you, but he said. Thought maybe my brain was filling in faces. Disappointed? She asked. Relieved, he said. I always hoped if I saw you again, it would be on this side of the dirt. A soft shuffle in the corner made her glance over. A Navy doctor watched from near the monitor, stethoscope draped around his neck chart and hand. A nurse stood beside him adjusting a drip. Both pretended to be very interested in numbers. Riley turned back to Morales. You left a note, she said, in your pocket. He grinned, then winced. Thought I lost that, he said. Wrote it in the back of a Humvee on the way out of Black Lantern. Long time ago. He shifted his head just enough to get more of her in his field of view. After that op rumor said you were gone, he added. Some said you went out with that last bird. Some said you walked into the desert. I did not like any version that did not end with you breathing. She let the words settle. The walls of the room seemed to bend a little around the weight of another place. You did not look so hot yourself, she said. That day. He chuckled, which set off a cough. The nurse at the corner twitched, then relaxed when his vitals held steady. You remember it, he asked. You took shrapnel through the flank, she said. Kept trying to stand up every time I turned around. Marines do not like lying down, he said. You did that day, she said, eventually. The edges of the desert came back in pieces, heat pressing on them like a hand. Dust caught in mascara of sweat tracks. The sound of distant small arms fire popping irregularly. Men calling out for medics with the flattening of vowels that happened when fear hit a certain pitch. Riley saw again the cramped alley they had turned into a temporary aid station. Bodies lined along a wall, each one tagged with what she had done and what she could not do. Blood soaked into cracked concrete, turning it almost black. Morales had been propped against a half-collapsed doorway, one leg in a makeshift tourniquet hand clamped over his side. You told me to knock it off, he said now. You said if I stood up again, you would tape me to a wall. It was a reasonable threat, she said. He looked at her, and she could tell he was walking through the same memory. You went back out 3 times, Kateria, he continued, into that kill zone. Streets were still hot. We were sure you were not coming back. Someone had to fetch more bodies, she said. You brought them all, he said. Not all, she replied quietly. He did not argue. They both remembered the ones who had stayed under the tarps. The Navy doctor cleared his throat. I do not mean to interrupt, he said, sarcasm just barely kept out of his professional tone, but I would very much like to document parts of this for the record, with your permission. His eyes flicked between them, full of curiosity he tried to hide. Morales smiled without showing his teeth. You ever have your chest fill with air that is not supposed to be in there, Doc? He asked. The doctor shook his head. Feels like drowning standing up, Morales said. I knew it when it started. Felt it in the truck. Kept thinking if I can get to a hospital, maybe someone will stick a needle in me. Then I see her. He nodded toward Riley. And I think, well, I must already be dead because Grey Wolf does not belong in a bright room with clean floors. The nurse's eyes widened a fraction. But she was real, Morales went on. Shoved that fancy doctor out of the way and popped my chest like she was opening a soda. The nurse swallowed hard. The doctor scribbled something on the chart that was probably not the word soda, but was close in spirit. Morales looked at Riley again, more serious now. You did not have to do anything, he said. You were out. You earned quiet. Riley studied the lines of tape across his chest. Once you know where the needle goes, she said, it is hard to pretend you do not. The doctor gave a short exhale that might have been a laugh if the room had been a different kind of place. You are the one who did his field decompression, he said. In a civilian ER, without imaging. Yes, she said. You are aware that if anything had gone wrong, you would be the center of a multi-agency investigation by now. Yes, she repeated. He shook his head slowly. From what I'm seeing on the scans, he said, if you had waited, we would be finishing paperwork instead of rounds. The nurse glanced up, eyes bright. Thank you, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Riley shrugged one shoulder. He kept his end of the note, she said. I kept mine. Morales watched her, something softer moving in his expression now. You look tired, he said. So do you, she replied. He smiled again, lines fanning from the corners of his eyes. Them firing you is the dumbest thing I have heard in a while, he said. And I have heard Marines talk. News travels fast, she said. The commander told me, he replied. He was pacing like a caged dog before he left. Could not believe they pushed you out for doing your job too well. She let out a breath. It is their building, she said, their rules. But your patience, he said. She did not answer. Silence said enough. The lieutenant commander stepped in, then knocking once on the doorframe. Time is up for now, he said to Morales. Doc gets nervous if we talk too long. Morales rolled his eyes. Doc gets nervous when I breathe, he said. That is his job, Riley told him. Yours is to lie very still and not pull anything important out. He huffed. Yes, ma'am. Her gaze dropped to his hand where it rested on the blanket. She reached out and wrapped her fingers around his for a moment, careful of the IV. Stay put, she said. Try not to get shot again. I am running out of creative ways to repair you. No promises, he said, but I will try not to make you work that hard next time. She let go. Outside in the corridor, the noise of the ICU seemed louder after the close quiet of the room. Alarms from other beds, the wheeled murmur of carts. The commander fell in step beside her as they walked. You were good in there, he said. It is easier when they are not bleeding on the floor, she said. He nodded toward a small conference nook off the hall. Glass walls, a table, a coffee pot that had seen better days. Got a minute? He asked. She sat across from him. The chair felt wrong under her. Hospital chairs always did. He pulled a folded document from an inner pocket and set it on the table between them. The paper was heavy with a sheen that caught the fluorescent light. The brass are paying attention, he said. They did not like hearing that a hospital fired one of our best for doing what we trained you to do. She traced the edge of the paper with one finger, but did not open it. They cannot tell a civilian hospital how to run their HR, she said. No, he agreed. They can, however, make some decisions about where you belong. She looked up at him, eyes steady. I belong in rooms where people are trying to live, she said. Not in someone else's story about heroics. He leaned back, watching her. You know we are not going to stop knocking just because you do not like the way the knocking sounds, he said. She thought of the Seahawk landing on Rainport Mercy's lawn, the stunned faces in the lobby, the way the operators had saluted. They can send letters, she said. Make calls, fly circles over my building. I still have only one pair of hands. He smiled a little at that. Good hands, he said it all. La pensée, he said. He tapped the unopened paper. Keep it, he said. Read it when it is quiet, or throw it away, but do not pretend it does not exist. She slid it into her bag next to the paperback with the cracked spine. By the time he walked her back to the helicopter pad, the drizzle had picked up, turning the air into a curtain of fine needles. The Seahawk waited with engines idling, rotors spinning lazily. You sure you want to go back to that place? He asked, raising his voice over the noise. They still have emergencies, she said. You do not work there. She looked toward the distant smudge of the city. People still crash their cars, she said. Kids still swallow the wrong thing. Hearts still stop, whether my name is on their schedule or not. He studied her, then nodded. We will get you home, he said. She climbed in the coin in her pocket, clicking against her keys as she moved. The sound was small, swallowed quickly by the engine, but she heard it. The ride back to Rainport was shorter, or felt that way. She watched the base recede, then the industrial strip, then the first low wave of houses. The hospital came into view, a block of white and glass against the gray sky. From up here, the front lawn looked untouched. The rotor marks would wash away with the next downpour. The Seahawk did not land this time. It circled once a wide loop that gave her a clear view of the building. The commander spoke in her headset. Consider this a courtesy drop-off, he said. We are not supposed to be doing flybys. Then do not tell them, she said. He laughed. The helicopter banked away. A smaller pad behind a municipal building waited for them closer to the river. From there, a plain Navy sedan carried her the last few blocks, the interior smelling of vinyl and a faint hint of coffee. They let her out at the corner near the hospital rather than at its door. Riley stepped onto the sidewalk, bag over her shoulder again. Traffic murmured past. The hospital sign glowed its calm white letters as if nothing unusual had ever happened on its lawn. Through the glass of the lobby, she could see movement. Figures at the desk, someone pushing a wheelchair, a child holding a stuffed animal too tightly. Her fingers found the coin in her pocket. It sat against her skin, warm from the ride. She turned away from the main entrance and started toward home, her steps steady on the wet pavement. Rainport's sidewalk still shone from the last of the rain. Riley walked the familiar route to her apartment, cut through a small park, where the wet grass smelled sharp and green, climbed the stairs to the second floor of a building that always seemed to need painting. Her key turned in the lock with the same small resistance as every other night. Inside the apartment greeted her with quiet. A narrow couch, a small table, a kitchen counter with 2 mugs turned upside down to dry. The fridge hummed. Somewhere in the wall, a pipe ticked as it cooled. She set her bag on the chair by the door and pulled off her jacket. The coin dropped against the wood in her pocket, a small, dull note. For a long moment, she simply stood there, feeling the absence of the ER noise. No monitors, no overhead pages, no carts. The silence pressed as heavy as the rotors had. She took the coin out and set it beside the folded letter from the brass, which she drew from her bag. The patch lay on top of the envelope, wolf-turned upward thread catching the overhead light. She did not open the letter. She made coffee instead. The motion steadied her. Filter, spoon, water. The machine hissed and sputtered itself to life. While it worked, she turned on the small radio by the sink. A local station filled the room with low music and a calm voice reading headlines. Traffic on I-5 still slow from last night's pileup. City council arguing about budgets. A brief mention of a military exercise along the coast. No one spoke of a Navy helicopter landing on a hospital lawn. Hospitals were good at keeping certain stories inside their walls. She poured coffee into a mug and took it to the table. The envelope waited there. The patch stared at her. She flipped the patch over and saw the stitching on the back, the tight knots that kept the wolf from unraveling. Her fingers hovered over the envelope flap, then pulled back. Not tonight. She slid both patch and letter into the drawer under the table, the coin she kept out, placing it in front of her on the wood. She drank her coffee in slow swallows, watching the brass circle catch the light each time she moved her hand. Sleep, when it finally came, arrived in short bursts. She dreamed of hallways that turned into alleys that turned into trenches. In every version she had gloves on and someone called her name through static. She woke with her heart pounding and the morning sun trying to force its way through thin curtains. The coin still sat on the table. She showered, dressed, and almost reached for her badge before remembering it was not there. Her hand closed on empty air at her collarbone. The absence felt sharper than the first time. Rainport outside her window looked like it always did. School buses rumbled past. A neighbor yelled at a dog that refused to come back inside. Life went on at its regular pace. At Rainport Mercy, the pace had shifted. The night after she flew out, the ER buzzed with the kind of quiet that comes after impact. At the nurses' station, monitors glowed, charts piled up, but conversations stayed close to the chest. Shoulders leaned in. Voices dropped when certain names passed. Did you see how they stood for her? A respiratory therapist asked, a tech eyes wide. I was on the stairs, the tech said. Heard the rotor, thought the roof was coming off. Then that commander guy saluted her. They called her Grey Wolf. A younger nurse added, fingers curled around a styrofoam cup. Like in that rumor, the one about the medic who pulled a whole squad out of that mess overseas. I always thought that was just a story, someone else said. It was, the nurse replied, until it walked out of here carrying a canvas bag. Charts still needed to be signed. Orders still needed to be entered. Hands still worked IV lines and blood draws, yet beneath all of it ran a fresh current. In the break room where the television usually played game shows or news, someone had muted it and written on the whiteboard instead. Thank you, Riley. The letters were crooked, written in different pens. In the director's suite upstairs, the air carried a different charge. Leonard Briggs sat at the head of the conference table, a half-emptied cup of coffee cooling at his elbow. Around the table, department heads shifted in their seats. Public affairs called, Briggs said. His voice was less steady than usual. They want to know why we had a Navy Special Warfare helicopter on our lawn. Local press picked up some photos from social media. It is all over the city feeds. The head of security cleared his throat. Hard to keep that quiet, he said. Those birds are loud. Someone slid a tablet across the table. On the screen, a frozen image showed Riley standing in the lobby, the lieutenant commander saluting her. Behind them, staff stared with open faces, some in awe, some in confusion. Briggs stared at the paused image for several seconds. No one mentioned she was military, he said. She did not mention it either, Eve, the chief nursing officer replied. We do not exactly ask for combat history and intake. We ask for immunizations and malpractice coverage. She handled every train wreck in that department without blinking, the head of trauma said. I watched her run that chemical ingestion case like she had done it under fire. Turns out she had. Klein sat near the far end of the table, shoulders tight. She shoved me in the hallway, he said. She broke the chain of command. She put a needle in a chest without an order. And saved a Marine who would have been in our morgue by morning, the trauma head said. Klein's jaw worked. We cannot build policy around rare outliers, he said stiffly. We have structures for a reason. We built those structures for people of average experience, the chief nursing officer said. She was not average. Briggs lifted a hand. We are not rewriting the entire hospital around one person, he said. However, optics matter. We fired a decorated combat medic the day before a special warfare team arrived to honor her. The words hung there heavy. It suggests, he continued, that our priorities may be misaligned. There was a small shuffle of papers and a shared glance or two. The head of risk management spoke up, voice careful. We can address some of that with a policy adjustment, she said. Clarify that in life-threatening circumstances, staff are empowered to act under standing emergency protocols without fear of punitive action, as long as their actions are within accepted clinical standards. She stuck a 12 gauge in his chest in a hallway, Klein muttered. 14 gauge, the trauma head corrected automatically. 14, the risk manager said. With textbook placement, the subsequent imaging confirmed the indication. That is well within ATLS guidelines for emergent decompression. Briggs rubbed his temples. Draft something as you could. Call it heart protocol or something similar. Make sure every department sees it. Use her full name, the chief nursing officer said quietly. She earned it. Briggs hesitated. Then he nodded. Very well, he said. The Riley Heart Emergency Care Policy. The meeting moved on to other topics, but the tone had changed. Words like liability and throughput shared space now with judgment and clinical autonomy. On the ER floor the next day, an email pinged into inboxes and a stack of printed memos appeared at the charge nurse's station. Effective immediately in cases of imminent threat to life or delay would significantly increase mortality risk. Licensed clinical staff are authorized to initiate emergency interventions within the scope of their training without prior administrative review. Actions taken in good faith to preserve life will be supported by hospital leadership. At the bottom in clean type was the title, The Riley Heart Protocol. A nurse read it swallowed and pinned one copy to the lounge bulletin board with an extra push of the thumbtack. About time, she murmured. 2 days after the Seahawk lifted away, Riley found herself standing across the street from Rainport Mercy without quite remembering the walk there. She had not planned to go back so soon. At least that was what she had told herself while washing dishes and folding laundry she did not care about. But the thought of Morales lying in ICU staring at a ceiling with only machines for company finally outweighed the tightness in her chest at the idea of stepping onto hospital tile again. She waited for the light to change, crossed with a small group of visitors, and entered through the main doors. The lobby looked the same. Fountain, information desk, art. Yet the way people moved inside it had shifted in small ways. The woman at the desk straightened when she saw her. Ms. Hart, she said. The name came out careful as if she had practiced it. Good morning. Good morning, Riley replied. We have something for you, the woman added, reaching under the counter. She brought up a small bundle of folded paper edges curling from multiple hands, held together with a large clip. At the top, in padded marker, someone had written, for Riley. Riley took it. This started showing up after you left, the woman said. Staff put notes on your old locker, then copies, then more people wrote. She flushed a little. I thought you should see them. Riley loosened the clip. Short messages filled the pages in different handwriting. Thank you for staying with my son when I was stuck in traffic. He still talks about the nurse who drew superheroes on his bandage. You covered my shift when my mom was in hospice. I never said how much that meant. You taught me how to run my first trauma and did not laugh when I messed up. I will not forget that. The notes piled one over another, some from staff, some from patients, some unsigned. She refastened the clip and nodded once in thanks. Is the ICU still restricting visitors? She asked. They will make room, the woman said. There was no question in her tone. On the second floor, the elevator doors opened to a quieter hallway. Here the sounds were softer. Monitors muffled by closed doors. Nurses talking low. As Riley walked toward the ICU, one of the nurses coming the other way did a double take. You came back, the nurse said. I am visiting a friend, Riley answered. Which room? The nurse asked. 6? The nurse smiled, something like relief in it. He has been asking if you were all right, she said. Every time he's awake enough to string a question together. At the unit entrance, the same 2 Marines from before nodded and stepped aside. The glass doors opened on a breath of colder, cleaner air. Morales lay propped higher now, more alert. Tanks had decreased. One of the lines in his arm was gone. The dressing on his chest had been changed, edges crisp. You look almost human, Riley said. He grinned. They tell me I get promoted to decorative plant if I keep healing on schedule, he said. Figure I will aim for that. She moved closer, pulled a chair up and sat. How is the pain, she asked. Like something big sat on my chest and then decided to leave a note about it, he said. Manageable. He tilted his head. They told me about your helicopter ride, Emigild, he said. Said the whole hospital lined up at the windows. I noticed, she said. Somebody put up that protocol memo with your name on it, he added. One of the nurses snapped a photo, showed me. His smile grew. You are hospital famous now. She shook her head. They will forget, she said. New crises come. Maybe, he said. But they will practice sticking needles in the right spot on mannequins now, I bet. That sticks longer than a headline. She did not argue. They talked of smaller things then. Weather. Food. The way the ICU nurse sang under her breath when she thought no one heard. Morales described the way the ceiling tiles above his bed had tiny flecks in them that looked like constellations if you stared long enough. You spend too much time looking up, Riley said. You will want to map everything. Better than staring at the monitor numbers, he said. Those get bossy. A knock sounded at the door jamb. Dr. Klein stood there. He had traded his night shift scrubs for a day set, but the circles under his eyes were darker. His tablet hung at his side, forgotten for once. Morales's face cooled a few degrees. He did not say anything. His stare said enough. Klein, Riley said. Her voice was neutral. Can I talk to you? He asked. His gaze flicked to Morales. Both of you, actually. Riley studied his face. The usual polished confidence had slipped. Something like shame sat where ego usually did. Come in, she said. He stepped inside, closed the door halfway behind him, not enough to feel secretive, just enough to keep the hallway noise out. I am making rounds, he began, then stopped. The rehearsed line did not fit. I wanted to say something first, he corrected. Before we get to blood counts and lung capacity. He looked at Morales. When they brought you in he said, I saw a complication and a billing problem. Not a person who had already served more than I ever will. He turned to Riley. When I blocked you in that hallway, he said, I did it because I was afraid. Not for the patient. For my metrics. For my place in this building. I called what you did an assault because admitting it was necessary would have meant admitting I froze. The words came out stiff at first, then looser as if they had been pressing for a while. I was wrong, he said, though. Silence settled around the bed. The monitor beeped, unconcerned. Riley watched him. I will not pretend that I would not do the decompression again, she said. I would. I know, he replied. He swallowed. When that helicopter landed, he said slowly, every story I told myself about who mattered in this place shifted. I have been in training my whole life. You were in something else entirely and never used it to ask for anything. He looked smaller than she had ever seen him, not physically, something in the posture. I am sorry, Tissaud, he said, for how I treated you, for not listening when you said he was crashing, for making you walk out those doors with your bag like you had done something shameful. Morales shifted his hand on the blanket. Just so you know, the Marine said, if you had succeeded in sending me down the road that night, I would be dead. So if she forgives you, she is kinder than I am. Klein flinched. Riley set a hand briefly on Morales's forearm, a small caution. I appreciate your apology, she said to Klein. Whether it changes anything on your side, I cannot say. I am not on your staff anymore. He nodded. I know, he said. But I can change how I teach the residents, how I write the protocols I get a hand in, how quickly I step aside when someone knows something I do not. He hesitated. They offered you something, did they not? He asked. The Navy. The commander looked like a man on a mission. Riley thought of the envelope in her drawer still unopened and the patch lying on top of it. They made a formal invitation, she said. Klein shifted his weight. Whatever you choose, he said. I hope you know this place is different because you were here, whether or not it deserved you. It was as close as he could come to asking if she would ever work alongside him again. She held his gaze for a moment, then inclined her head. Thank you, she said. He left more quietly than he had entered. Morales watched the door close. That had to stink, he said. He said. For him, she asked. For you, he replied, hearing him finally see you after you are already gone. She considered that. It is all right, she said. Some people do not see well in real time, only in retrospect. She stayed another 10 minutes, long enough to watch Morales complain convincingly about hospital food and charm the nurse into promising extra dessert. When she finally stood to go, he lifted a hand in a small wave. Do not let them drag you into something you do not want, he said. They cannot drag, she said, only ask. Yeah, he said. They are very good at asking in a way that feels like gravity. She smiled at that. Outside the ICU, the corridor seemed clearer. The air tasted less like antiseptic and more like possibility. At the nurse's station, the chief nursing officer stood talking with the charge nurse. She turned when she saw Riley. Ms. Hart, she said, I'm glad you came. I had a patient to check on, Riley said. We have missed your hands down there, the officer said. It would be a lie to say otherwise. Riley looked toward the elevator that led back to the ER. People down there know where to put a needle if they need to, she said. They will be all right. That is partly because of you, the officer replied. Riley did not argue that either. She left the hospital by a side stairwell, avoiding the main lobby. The steps echoed under her shoes. Each landing smelled different. One of cafeteria trays, one of cleaning solution, one of the faint metallic tang that seeped from the OR vents. Outside, the day had brightened. The clouds had thinned enough for the sun to break through in patches, lighting up sections of pavement and leaving others in shade. She walked without hurry. The city stretched ahead, streets crossing in a familiar grid. The weight of the coin in her pocket kept time with her stride. At the corner, a car turned a little too fast, through a puddle, sending a spray of cold water toward the sidewalk. A young nurse in light sneakers jumped back with a squeak, looking down at her soaked socks with dismay. Riley stepped aside so she could wobble past, holding onto her coffee for dear life. Rough start? Riley asked. Story of my life, the girl said, then blinked as recognition hit. Wait, you are Riley, right? That is me, Riley said. The nurse's cheeks flushed. I am in my first year, she said. I watched you in triage once. You made a kid laugh while you were putting in an IV. I have been trying to figure out how you did that. Riley thought of the small boy with the superhero bandage. Talk to them like they are people first, she said. Needles second. The nurse nodded as if filing the advice somewhere important. Thank you, she said. Riley left her there, hopping to avoid the worst of the puddles, and continued down the block. The hospital receded behind her. The patch in her drawer waited. The letter, too. Her hands empty at her sides felt ready. The letter waited 2 more days. Riley pretended not to notice it. She cleaned the apartment, which did not need cleaning. She walked to the corner store for groceries she did not really want. She sat by the window with a book open on her lap and read the same paragraph 3 times without taking in a word. The envelope sat in the drawer under the table, thick and patient. The patch lay on top of it, Wolf's head turned toward the seam. On the 3rd night, the hum of the fridge and the ticking of the pipe were not enough to drown out the quiet weight of it. She pulled the drawer open. The patch slid aside easily. The envelope resisted the heavy paper catching on the wood grain for a second before giving way. A seal in dark ink stared up at her wings and shielded the familiar shape of an eagle that appeared on too many commendations and condolence notices. She broke it with her thumb. Inside lay several sheets with formal margins and careful language. She read every word. Joint Special Warfare Medical Response Academy. Command position, authority to design training. Freedom to shape doctrine. Access to resources most hospitals would never see packaged in phrases like broad discretion and full support of the fleet. Her name appeared 3 times, the call sign once. They had written it in ink, Grey Wolf. A note in the margin, handwritten in a different style, caught her eye. We would be honored to have you return to service in this capacity. It was not signed with a name she recognized, but she knew the weight behind it. People who sat in rooms without windows had made this offer. People who liked clean lines and clear chains of command. Her fingers rested on the edge of the paper. There was a version of her life that turned on this decision. In that version, she would walk back into a world where everyone knew her rank before they knew her voice, where students would sit straight when she entered a room, where helicopters would land because she said they should. She could imagine it. The fast days, the hard nights, the sense that every lesson might shorten someone else's time lying in dirt. Her eyes drifted to the coin on the table. Rescue at all costs. She remembered the first time someone had pressed it into her hand. The metal still warm from his palm, the grin he had given her, tired and bright, half of it missing where a blast had taken a tooth. For when you forget why you are doing this, he had said. She had not forgotten. She had just tried to learn a different way to do it. The hospital had been that different way. Bright rooms instead of dark alleys, pillows instead of sandbags, plastic curtains instead of concrete walls. She folded the letter back along its creases, precise and deliberate, and returned it to the envelope. Then she took the envelope to the kitchen trash can and dropped it in. The sound it made was small, a faint thud against eggshells and coffee grounds. The patch she kept. She slipped it into the back of the drawer under a stack of old phone bills, where it would not stare at her every time she reached for a pen. The coin she slipped into her pocket. She slept better that night. Morning came bright and cold. Sunlight found its way between the buildings, painting long rectangles on the sidewalk. The air smelled fresher, washed clean by the days of rain. She walked without deciding where to go, her feet knew. By the time she turned the last corner, Rainport Mercy rose in front of her glass, catching the pale sky. Someone had cleaned the front windows. The water in the fountain leapt higher than before. Near the main entrance, a maintenance crew knelt by the lawn, fixing a patch where skids had gouged the grass. Dark soil showed through the torn green. Riley paused, watching them tamp new sod into place. A small boy in a red jacket stood with his mother nearby, pointing at the bare patch. "That is where the helicopter was," he said. "The big one. My dad showed me the video." His mother hushed him gently, pulling him toward the doors. Riley followed at a slower pace. Inside the lobby felt almost ordinary. Volunteers rolled a cart of magazines toward the waiting area. A man in a delivery uniform signed a clipboard. The woman at the information desk was on the phone, nodding. Riley went up one floor instead of down. On the second floor, a set of double doors marked "Staff Only" led toward administrative offices. She had rarely had reason to go there. Most of her life in the building had existed 3 floors below in the perpetual twilight of the ER. She knocked on the glass panel beside the letters "Executive Suite." A receptionist cracked the door. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here to see Mr. Briggs," Riley said. The woman blinked. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "No," Riley said. The woman hesitated, then glanced at a schedule on her screen. "He has a gap in 10 minutes, she said. "I will see if he's free." She disappeared. Voices murmured in the background. A minute later, she returned and held the door open wider. "This way." Briggs' office had a view of the river. The glass wall behind him framed a strip of moving water and the far bank with its warehouses and cranes. He stood when she entered. That was new. "Ms. Hart," he said. "Mr. Briggs." They regarded each other for a moment. "I was not expecting you," he said. "Nor were you expecting the Navy," she replied. A corner of his mouth twitched, humorless. "No," he admitted. "We seem to have been unprepared for both." He gestured toward a chair. "Please." She sat. His desk was neat, stacks of paper aligned. A single photo in a frame turned slightly toward him showed 2 children on a beach, squinting into the sun. "I received a call," he said, from someone with a title that made my assistant very polite. "About me," she said. "About what happened here, Sishog," he replied. "And about what that meant to people outside these walls." He folded his hands, fingers interlaced. "There is no universe in which I can fully undo the fact that I terminated you the night you saved Staff Sergeant Morales," he said. "That happened. The record shows it. So do a dozen cell phones discreetly pointed at our lobby." He let out a breath. "What I can do," he continued, "is recognize that decision as a failure. Of my judgment, of the culture I oversaw. We have started to correct that structurally. You may have seen the updated policy." "I saw my name in a memo," she said. "It belongs there," he replied, "more than mine." He opened a drawer and took out a folder. "I asked you here because I would like to offer you your job back," he said. "Same pay, seniority preserved. We would clear your file of termination language and classify the separation as administrative error. You would return as a staff nurse in the emergency department." He slid the folder across the desk. "It is the least we can do," he said. Riley did not reach for it. The offer sat between them. "I read your interview," she said. He looked genuinely surprised. "My interview." "On the hospital website, she said. "When I first applied, you said your goal was to build a place where patients came first." Color rose in his cheeks. "Words are cheaper than policies," Wendy asked. "Policies are cheaper than actions." "Actions are cheaper than lives," she said. He inclined his head. "I have been reminded of that," he said. She glanced down at the folder. "You want me back in your building," she said. "Is that because you need me, or because you need to repair an image?" "Both," he said. "I will not insult you by pretending otherwise." They looked at each other. "I will not sign today," she said. "I will think." He nodded. "Take the folder with you," he said. "Or do not. We will keep a copy." She did not take it. "You keep it," she said. "If I come back, we can fill it out then." He accepted that. She stood. "One more thing," he said. "One thing," he said as she turned. She paused. "If you do come back," he said, "I want you to know that you will have authority to speak up not just in trauma bays, but in meetings. I do not want another decision that erases the experience right in front of me." She regarded him for a moment. "We will see," she said. Downstairs, the air felt different on her skin, less heavy. She made her way back toward the ER on habit feet, taking the long route through side halls and past storerooms. At the turn before the ambulance bay, she heard the familiar bark of a voice on the radio. "Incoming 2, MVC multiple victims, 10 minutes out." The words folded into the older noise of beeping machines and distant voices. A nurse hurried past her, glancing apologetically as she bumped Riley's shoulder. "Sorry," the nurse said. "We just got another pile-up." "It is all right," Riley said. The nurse pivoted. "You are Riley Wright?" she asked. "Yes. We are short a pair of hands," the nurse blurted. "Half the team is tied up with a septic shock in bed 3. I know you are not staff now, but if you are willing, we can put you in family liaison or triage overflow or—" She trailed off, suddenly aware that she might be asking for more than she should. Riley thought of the folder on Briggs's desk, the letter in her trash, the coin in her pocket. "Where do you need me most?" she asked. The nurse's shoulders visibly relaxed. "Triage, she said. They are saying 3 cars at least, maybe more." People were already shifting to make space. A tech rolled an empty bed toward the entrance. He noticed Riley and gave her a quick nod, the kind that colleagues shared at the start of a hard hour. Without thinking, she reached for the drawer beside the charge nurse's station. Her old drawer. It slid open under her hand as if it had never been shut. Inside lay a pair of scissors, a roll of tape, a pen, and a spare ID clip. Someone had tucked a sticky note on top. "If you come back, this is still yours." The handwriting was cramped, probably one of the older nurses. She clipped the ID to her pocket without a badge attached. The gesture felt half absurd, half right. Then she walked to the sliding doors and stood beside the triage nurse. The ambulances arrived on a flood of sirens and light. The first gurney through held a pale teenager clutching his side, eyes wild. The second, an older woman whispering apologies through bloodstained lips. The third, a driver who kept asking if the other car was all right between shallow breaths. Riley's world narrowed in the way she knew so well. Blood pressures, pupils, mechanism of injury, the way people moved or did not. She did not need a job title to do what she did best. Her hands moved, 2 fingers to a neck to feel a pulse, 1 palm to steady a shoulder, a glove pulled tight over scarred knuckles, a blanket yanked from a shelf and tucked around shaking knees, her voice low and precise, cutting through panic. "You are here. Keep breathing. Look at me." Time became a stretch of linked moments. There were no rotors here, only sirens, and even those blurred into background. Somewhere in the middle of it, Dr. Klein appeared at her shoulder. "I have bed 5, Vicky," I said. "You have got this one?" "I have her," Riley answered, already guiding a woman with glass in her hair toward an empty chair. Klein opened his mouth as if to say more, then shut it and moved on, trusting her assessment without argument. When the last ambulance left for another facility, and the waiting room had been sorted into treated, admitted, and discharged, the ER settled into a quieter hum. The triage nurse let out a long breath. "Thank you," she said. "I do not know how we would have gotten through that without you." Riley peeled off a glove. Her skin underneath was damp and faintly wrinkled. "You would have," she said. "You just would have been more tired." The nurse shook her head. "There is a difference between barely managing and doing it right," she replied. "You know that." Riley considered the room. Doctors leaned over charts. Nurses adjusted drips. A janitor mopped up a small puddle of saline near bed 2. The lights shone too bright as always. She felt the coin press against her leg. The world she had stepped away from and the world she had tried to build a life in had collided on a front lawn. Dust and glass, desert and wet pavement, gunfire and car horns. In all of them, the constant had been the same. Blood, breath, hands. "Do you want me to tell admin you were here?" the triage nurse asked tentatively. "For the schedule, for whatever comes next." Riley looked at her. "I will talk to them myself," she said. She walked back to the stairwell instead of taking the elevator. Each step felt grounded, solid. On the second floor, she did not turn toward the executive suite. She knew where Briggs was and that the folder still waited. That could come later. She turned instead to a smaller office with a glass panel in the door that read Clinical Education. Inside, shelves of binders lined the walls. Posters titled things like Sepsis Bundle and Trauma Triad of Death hung in frames. A woman in her 50s with gray streaks in her hair sat at a desk typing. She looked up. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm looking for whoever handles training," Riley said. "That would be me," the woman replied. "I am Janet." "I am Riley," she said. "Hart." Janet's eyebrows climbed. "I know your name," she said. "Half my in-service requests reference you now. Chest decompression, rapid airway, de-escalation in intoxicated patients." She pushed her chair back. "I heard you were gone," she added. "I'm not sure what I am yet," Riley said. "But if you are writing new trainings, I would like to help, especially for emergencies where the protocol does not fit neatly on a flowchart." Janet studied her for a moment. "I have been begging for someone from the floor to work with," she said. "The slides they send from corporate are about as useful as a raincoat in a hurricane." She gestured toward a second chair. "Sit," she said. Tell me what you think nurses and residents need drilled into their bones before they see what you have seen. Riley sat. Her mind began to arrange itself in a different way. Not just around the next patient, but around the next 20. Around the ones she would never meet because someone she trained would be there instead. Start with this, she said. Teach them that when someone's chest is filling with air, paperwork is not oxygen. Janet smiled a quick, fierce expression. I like you, she said. Welcome to education. Somewhere above them, a helicopter moved across the sky. The sound reached them faintly, a distant chop, then faded. Riley heard it and did not flinch. Her hands rested on the table, scars pale against the wood. There were rooms full of people waiting to be saved. Some in uniforms, some in hospital gowns, some not yet in trouble, but they would be. She could not be in every room. She could make sure more of the hands in those rooms knew where to put the needle, how to hold the airway, when to ignore fear and move. The coin in her pocket sat against her warm as if it had been in sunlight. Rescue at all cost. The cost, she realized, was not always measured in bullets or blood. Sometimes it was measured in what you chose to walk toward when every road was open. She leaned forward. Let us talk about real scenarios, she said. Start with a boy who drank something blue from under the sink. They filled the whiteboard before they finished their first pot of coffee. Blue marker for airway, red for bleeding, green for all the small decisions that could tilt everything one way or the other. Janet wrote big, broad letters at the top of the board. When the room tilts. Riley stood with the marker in her hand, socked in between a poster about stroke signs and a laminated chart of Glasgow coma scores. Her scrubs were plain as always, her expression was not. She drew a rectangle and labeled it kitchen floor. 6-year-old, she said, found lying on his side, blue liquid spilled near his mouth. Mom is crying, Dad is not there yet. She tapped the rectangle. Everyone sees the poison, she said. You teach them to see the airway first. Janet nodded, scribbling notes. Make them walk it, she said, not just read it. So they did. They pulled a worn training mannequin out of the closet, the kind with a generic plastic face and permanent half smile. They cleared a corner of the education room, rolled up the rug, and taped a blue outline on the floor. All right, Riley said to the small group of nurses and residents gathered around. This is your kitchen. He is your kid, or your neighbors, or a stranger. What do you touch first? A young resident pointed at the bottle. Take that away, he said. Keep the rest of the kids from drinking it. Riley nodded. Good instinct, she said. Now look at his chest. They watched the mannequin breathe, the mechanical rise and fall barely noticeable. She flicked a switch and the chest movement slowed. He is swelling, she said. You have 90 seconds before you cannot see those cords anymore. By the time she was done, the resident's forehead had a thin sheen of sweat, and the nurse beside him had her lower lip caught between her teeth. Again, Riley said. They ran it until the motions were not smooth yet, but less clumsy, until their hands went to the right place without needing to think through a checklist first. Word spread. Once a week turned into twice. Nurses swapped shifts to attend her sessions. Residents showed up early, hovering in the doorway with fresh coffee and the look of people who had heard stories and wanted to see if they were true. She did not talk about Black Lantern or rooftops or night vision. She talked about hallways, parking lots, bathroom floors. Places they knew. Your battlefield is tile, Schosten, she told them. Linoleum mostly. Your explosions are car crashes and cardiac arrests. You do not need to know what a mortar sounds like. You do need to know what it looks like when a patient stops compensating and just crashes. When they asked where she had learned some of the techniques, she kept her answer simple. I was taught by people who did not have enough supplies and could not afford to be wrong, she said. The coin sat in her pocket at every session. She felt it when she reached for a marker, when she slid her hand into her pocket, during a pause when she leaned back against the desk to listen. At the end of each training, she made them do one more thing. Write down one moment from your last shift, she said, where you did not know what to do for a second, just a second. You do not have to sign it. Put it in the box. The box filled quickly. I did not know whether to call security or sit down with the drunk who was shouting. I was afraid to intubate, so I waited until the attending came and the patient seized. I pretended I understood the medic's report in the ambulance bay, but the acronyms blurred. She read every slip after they left. They were maps, sort of showing where the training needed to go next. Downstairs, the ER felt the difference. The next time a patient arrived with a balloon chest and a trailing line of tanked oxygen, the resident on call did not wait for an attending. He looked at the X-ray, listened with his stethoscope, felt the chest wall with his fingers, and said out loud, so everyone could hear, "He is tensioning." The nurse beside him grabbed the kit before he finished the word. "We have standing protocol," she said. "Riley Hart." The decompression went smoothly. The hiss of air made everyone flinch and remembered gratitude. The patient's color shifted from gray to pink faster than nerves could catch up. Later, when paperwork time came, someone wrote in the chart, performed emergent needle decompression within scope per Riley Hart protocol. It no longer sounded like rebellion, it sounded like standard care. Not everything was dramatic. One afternoon, Riley walked through the main lobby on her way in and saw a familiar figure near the fountain. Dr. Aaron Klein sat on one of the padded benches, his white coat folded beside him. He was not looking at his phone. His elbows rested on his knees, hands loosely clasped. A young nurse from night sat beside him speaking quietly. Her voice broke once. He listened, nodding. Riley caught only a few words. The mother was yelling, and I thought I knew what to say, but I just snapped back at her, and now I feel like I made everything worse. Klein did not tell her to toughen up. He did not tell her to leave it at the door. He said, "Walk me through what you said, and we will see what you might do differently next time." His posture had changed in small ways lately. Less straight lines, more angles of humility. He noticed Riley and gave a small nod. It was not a plea or a performance. It was acknowledgement. She returned it and kept walking. On the ICU floor, Morales was learning to walk without swaying. They had moved him from the bed to a chair, then to short loops around the ward, his IV pole rattling like a reluctant companion. "Core feels like someone rearranged my insides with a shovel," he told her. "But I am upright." She walked beside him on one of his first longer circuits, her hand hovering near his elbow. "You ever going back to yelling at people in a desert?" he asked. "Or are you staying in these hallways for good?" "I tried the desert," she said. "The hallways have better coffee." He snorted. "I heard a rumor," he said, "about some academy thing they wanted you for." "I read a letter," she said, "then I took the trash out." He stopped mid-step, leaning on the pole. "You turned down command of a special warfare medical academy," he said. "Did you at least keep the paper so you can show it off in bar stories?" "The paper was thick," she said. "It did not fold well." He shook his head in mock disappointment, then winced when the movement tugged his healing muscles. "You could train a whole generation of medics," he said. "They would treat you like a legend." "Legends are stories people tell because they were not there," she said. "I would rather teach a handful of people whose names I know and see them walk past me in the hallway." "You know more than a handful," he pointed out. She thought of Janet, of the residents, of the nurses, who now turned to each other and said, "She would push now." "Enough," she said. When the day came for his transfer to a rehabilitation facility, the hospital gathered in small clusters to see him off. Not a formal send-off, just a scattering of people who had spent nights watching his monitor or adjusting his meds. He wore hospital sweatpants and a plain navy shirt. His hair had grown out enough to stick up. The scar on his chest would be hidden beneath fabric, invisible to most. The transport team rolled his wheelchair toward the elevator. At the junction near the nurse's station, he lifted his hand in a salute. This time he finished it. Riley stepped forward and caught his wrist as she had before, but not to stop him. She guided his hand up, steadying the motion. Staff along the hall paused. He held the salute for a second, then dropped it. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" she asked. "For not being where they told you to be," he said. "So you could be where I needed you." The elevator doors slid open. He rolled inside, lifted his hand again in a smaller wave, and disappeared behind the closing metal. Riley stood there a moment longer, then turned back toward the stairs. The hospital's culture shift was not a single memo or a single hero shot. It was a series of small, accumulated changes. In morning huddles, charge nurses started asking, "Anyone have a close call last night we can learn from?" In debriefs after hard codes, someone always posed the question, "Did we let paperwork slow us down anywhere?" Residents began to say things like, "I do not know, but I will find someone who has seen this before," without shame. Janet printed out a new set of teaching posters. They were simple black text on white. Assess, act, explain later. At the bottom, in smaller letters, it said, "Adapted from principles used by combat medic R. Hart." The font was clinical, the meaning was not. Months stretched. Riley split her time between hands-on shifts in the ER official enough that her name reappeared on the schedule, and hours upstairs in the education room, unofficial enough that half of what she taught did not come from any manual. Sometimes she still woke at night with the sound of rotors in her ears. The old panic would try to rise. She had learned to sit up, feel her own pulse, and listen past it. Outside her window, the city had its own noise. Cars, trains, rain, the distant horn of a ship on the river. The rotor sound became just one more note in that mix. One late afternoon in early spring, when the trees by the river showed the first signs of green, she heard that note from inside the hospital. She was in the stairwell somewhere between the ER and the second floor, a stack of photocopied training sheets under her arm. The vibration reached her feet first, faint but familiar. The air in the stairwell changed a small current sliding down from the roof. She reached the window on the landing and looked out. A Seahawk hovered above the pad near the medical wing, lowering itself with practiced ease. Its paint caught the last of the sun, turning the dark gray into something almost silver. Grass flattened, dust swirled. Her heart did not twist this time, it just settled. The door to the roof access opened and shut above her. She heard boots, then the muted clink of gear. The sounds passed, grew fainter, then were gone. Later, she learned from Janet that a small team had come in to give a briefing on mass casualty coordination. They had asked for existing training material. Janet had given them a stack of Riley's scenarios. They asked who wrote them, Janet said. I told them you did. Riley had only shrugged. That night, closing up the education room, she found a small square on the whiteboard that had not been there before. Taped to it was a patch. Not the wolf, a different insignia wings over a trident. Under it, in block letters, someone had written, "For when tile feels like dirt." No signature. She left it there. On a quiet shift a week later, only 3 patients in beds, and a hum that felt almost peaceful. A young nurse approached her at the nurse's station. "Riley, wait," the nurse said. "Can I ask you something?" "Ask," Riley said. "How do you keep doing this?" the nurse asked. "Years of it. Nights, blood, losing people, gaining them. The rules, the everything." Riley looked at her, at the faint smudge of pen ink on her wrist, at the crease between her eyebrows. "One patient at a time," she said. "One room, one hallway." "And when it feels like it is too much," the nurse said. Riley thought of desert nights and hospital mornings, of coins and letters and helicopters and chalk dust on whiteboards. "Find something that reminds you why you started," she said. "Keep it close. It does not have to be big." The nurse nodded slowly. "Do you have something like that?" she asked. Riley's hand went to her pocket. She felt the coin, its round edges worn smooth by years of fingers. The wolf on it had faded a little, but the words were as sharp as the day they had been stamped. "Rescue at all costs." "Yes," she said. The intercom crackled. "Trauma team to emergency," a voice called. "Incoming multiple, report to Bay 1. The nurse straightened, eyes widening. Riley stood. "Come on," she said. "You are up." They moved together toward the swinging doors. Behind them, the education room lights clicked off one by one. The posters on the walls stayed. The patch with wings and trident stuck to its spot on the whiteboard. The words under it glowed slightly in the dim light. In the ER, monitors flickered awake. Carts shifted, gloves snapped. The air thickened with anticipation. Riley took her place by the entrance, the triage nurse at her side, the young nurse just behind her. Through the glass, she could see the glow of approaching headlights and the flash of red and blue washing across wet pavement. She rolled her shoulders once, her hands felt steady. The sirens grew louder, then cut out as the first ambulance backed into sight. Riley let out a breath she had not realized she was holding and stepped forward. There were people waiting to be saved. The first ambulance came in hot. Red and blue strobes threw color across the glass, turning the ER doors into a blinking heartbeat. The vehicle swung backward toward the bay tires, spitting water. The siren cut off in a strangled wail that seemed to hang in the air for a second before falling silent. Riley felt the shift in the room. The hum snapped into alignment. People who had been leaning on counters straightened. Conversations died mid-sentence. The charge nurse lifted her head like a dog catching a scent. "Here we go," the triage nurse murmured. The doors slid open. Cold air and exhaust swept in first. Then the paramedics hauling the gurney in with practiced urgency voices, already tossing information ahead of them. 53-year-old male driver restrained. "Go, ye bombs fin?" The lead medic called. Front-end collision at city speeds. Steering wheel deformity. Hypotensive en route, systolic in the 70s, tacky to 150. Dullness on the left chest, decreased breath sounds. Possible abdominal bleed. 2 large bore IVs and fluids running. No time for CT. The man on the gurney was gray around the mouth, his breathing fast but shallow. Dried blood streaked his forehead. His shirt had been cut away, bearing a chest that rose unevenly. Riley saw 2 things at once. The present tile's rails overhead lights. The past broken concrete dust sky the color of old bruises. She blinked. The vision snapped back to the room she was in. "Bay 1, the charge nurse ordered. "Trauma team alerted. Get him on the monitor." They pushed the gurney forward. The young nurse who had been at her shoulder in triage hurried alongside, her face set, but eyes wide. Riley touched her elbow. "You are with me," she said. The nurse nodded a quick jerk. "Yes." Behind the first ambulance, a second backed into the bay. And a third. Triage had only just begun. But this one needed immediate hands. In Bay 1, the team flowed around the driver like they had rehearsed in Riley's scenarios. Monitor leads snapped on, blood pressure cuff, oxygen probe pads. The man's numbers climbed onto the screen in harsh green digits. They did not look good. 82/40, heart rate 152, oxygen saturation 85. Dr. Klein stepped in at the foot of the bed, hair slightly mussed for one's trauma gown already on. "What do we have?" he asked. Eyes on the man, but voice pitched to the room. The paramedic repeated his report in shorthand. Klein listened, nodding. Airway, he said, breathing circulation. A resident on his right side leaned in with a stethoscope, moving it across the man's chest. Absent breath sounds on the left, the resident said. Trachea feels deviated. The young nurse's gaze flicked to Riley. Riley held it for a heartbeat, then shifted her eyes toward the drawer where the decompression kit lived. The nurse got the message. She crossed to the wall, yanked the drawer open, and pulled out the kit. Her hands did not tremble. She had done this in the education room on plastic torsos that could not die. Now the skin in front of her was warm and damp and flawed. She placed the kit on the bedside table right where hands could find it. Klein's fingers pressed into the man's abdomen, checking for rigidity. Left upper quadrant tender, he said. Guarding, we have at least 2 problems. The left chest is the faster killer, Riley said. He glanced at her. It was not a challenge, it was agreement. Okay, he said. We are not waiting for imaging. He looked at the resident. Talk me through it, he said. The resident swallowed, then squared his shoulders. Probable tension pneumothorax, he said. Indication for emergent needle decompression. The young nurse stepped closer with the kit. 14 gauge 2 inches, she said. Second intercostal midclavicular, clean first. Her voice was steadier than her pulse, which Riley could see in the small vein at her throat. Klein nodded once. Do it, he said. The resident's hands moved to the man's chest. Riley saw his fingers count rib spaces mark the spot. His jaw set. The needle went in. The resistance, then the sudden give, showed plainly on his face, as he was not expecting the sound. No one ever really did. Air hissed out hot and trapped. The man's chest rose a little more evenly with the next breath. The monitor numbers began to crawl upward, slow but definite. 90/50, oxygen saturation inching toward 90. Good, Klein said. Bag him. Get ultrasound at the bedside. Start the massive transfusion protocol. Let surgery know they are about to have company. Riley stepped back half a pace, letting the organized chaos swell into the space she left. She watched the young nurse stand taller. Her gloved hands moved confidently from one task to the next. Securing IV lines, adjusting a mask, wiping sweat from her brow with the inside of her wrist, then laughing once quietly at herself. Remember to breathe, Riley said. The nurse exhaled. Right, she said. That thing. The next 2 gurneys came in almost on top of each other. A woman in her 30s with a broken humerus and a bruise blooming under her seatbelt line. A boy of about 10 with a deep cut on his scalp, crying more from fear than from pain. The triage nurse waved a paramedic toward Bay 3. That one can wait a minute, she said, nodding at the boy. Messy but stable. Riley crouched down to his level anyway as he rolled past. Nice haircut, she said, eyeing the shaved patch the paramedics had made around the wound. He sniffled. It looks weird, he said. He said. It looks brave, she replied. Tell your friends you got it in a secret lab. His mouth twitched. The woman with the broken arm gritted her teeth as they moved her. It is all right to swear, Riley told her. We have heard worse. The woman let loose a string of words that would have scorched better wallpaper. The nurse beside her mouthed 1 or 2 under her breath in sympathy. Within 15 minutes, the initial flood had been sorted. The bleeding driver rushed upstairs toward an operating room. The woman with the broken arm went to imaging. The boy with the head wound received 6 neat staples and a sticker. At the nurse's station, the board updated. Names turned from red to yellow to green as plans solidified. Riley leaned one hip against the counter and watched the team move. The young nurse approached, cheeks flushed, hairline damp. I did not pass out, she said breathlessly. You did not, Riley agreed. I thought my legs would go first, the nurse admitted. But my hands knew where to go. That is the point of running the drills, Riley said. You let your body write the notes. The nurse blew out a slow breath. I still feel like I want to sit down suddenly, she said. Sit, Riley said. Drink some water, then write down what scared you the most. We will use it next time. The nurse smiled, tired and proud, and headed toward the break room. The lull that followed felt earned, not empty. Klein joined Riley at the station, wiping his hands on a towel. You saw that, he said. I did, she replied. They moved differently, he said. Faster, but not frantic. You let them, she said. He watched the young nurse disappear through the break room door. She told me last week she was afraid she would freeze in a real emergency, he said. Said the training helped, but she was not sure it would translate. It did, Riley say. Yes, Riley said. He glanced at her pocket. Do you ever miss it? He asked. The other world, where everyone knows what patches like that mean. She thought of the academy letter in the trash, the patch in the drawer, the wolf etched in brass. I miss some of the people, she said, the rest I brought with me. He nodded. Briggs wants to talk about formalizing your split role, he said after a moment. Half clinical, half education. There is a committee, of course. Of course, she said. He asked me if it was sustainable, Klein continued. I told him we could not afford for it not to be. She did not say anything to that. He cleared his throat. Also, he added, as if remembering an errand, Morales sent a message through the VA, wanted me to tell you that rehab is a lot of stairs and he hates every single one of them. That pulled a small laugh from her. Tell him to lift his knees higher, she said. Stairs do not negotiate. I will, Klein said. He pushed off from the counter. You are on until 7, he said. Yes. Try not to save so many people that administration has a stroke, he said lightly. No promises, she said. The shift settled into its late-stage rhythm. A twisted ankle from a pickup game. A man who had eaten something that did not agree with him and wanted to be sure it was not his heart. A woman with chest pain that turned out to be her heart and was caught in time because someone double-checked. At 3 a.m. during one of the rare, quiet pockets, Riley slipped into the locker room. Her locker door opened on the familiar smell of detergent plastic and faint metal. The inside looked slightly different now. Someone had taped a small square of paper to the back wall. We will follow your example. No name. She sat on the bench and let her shoulders rest against the cool metal. The coin lay in her palm weight steady. She did not spin it. She turned it over once, twice tracing the letters with her thumb. The wolf's outline was almost smooth now from years of contact. In her mind, rotors still existed. So did desert winds. So did the cries of wounded men in languages she did not speak. They shared space now with the sound of rolling carts, the rustle of paper gowns, the soft click of pens on clipboards. The cost of rescue was never simple. It was time and sleep and the hard edges of decisions no memo could make easier. It was having pieces of two worlds stitched under the skin and learning to move without tearing. A page crackled overhead. Nurse Hart to triage pain. Triage, the intercom called. Walk in chest pain. She closed her hand around the coin and slipped it back into her pocket. When she left the locker room, the hallway lights buzzed softly. At the end of the corridor, the double doors to the ER stood open bright beyond. She walked toward the light steps, measured and sure. At triage, an older man sat in the plastic chair, one hand pressed to his chest, the other gripping the edge of the seat. Sir, she said, crouching to bring her eyes level with his, tell me what you are feeling. He looked at her like she might already know the answer and would not be surprised by it. Like something heavy, he said, right here. All right, she said, let us see what we can lift. Her hands moved. The ER kept breathing around her. By dawn, the night's sharp edges had worn down. The man with chest pain was upstairs on a telemetry floor rhythm stable. The pile-up patients were either admitted stitched or sent home with instructions and a number to call if anything felt wrong. The ER had returned to its low, uneven hum. Riley finished charting on her last patient and logged out of the computer. The screen went dark, reflecting her face for a second before it slipped into its own sleep. Go home, the charge nurse told her, before someone finds another reason to keep you. That sounds like a challenge, Riley said. Do not test me, the nurse replied, but there was a smile tucked into the corner of her mouth. Riley shrugged into her jacket in the locker room. The coin settled into its usual place in her pocket, as familiar as her keys. Someone had left a fresh packet of coffee on the bench with a sticky note. For night shift heroes, the handwriting was theatrical looping. She shook her head and put the packet on the shelf where everyone could reach it. When she stepped outside, the sky over Rainport was the pale gray that came just before real light. Streetlights still burned, but their glow seemed tired. A faint chill sat on the air damp, but not truly cold. She walked toward home, sneakers whispering over damp pavement. Above her, a small news helicopter stitched a path across the sky, tiny compared to the Seahawk she knew. Its rotors made a thin, high sound that barely touched her. She glanced up, watched it for a heartbeat, then lowered her eyes again to the street in front of her. A bicycle courier zipped past, backpack bouncing. A woman in scrubs from some other hospital yawned into her hand. A bus growled to a stop, doors wheezing open. Rainport woke around her. She slept deep when she reached her apartment, the kind of heavy, dreamless sleep that felt almost like being dropped into dark water. When she surfaced again, the sun sat higher, painting bright rectangles on her floor. In the kitchen, the mailbox key lay in its usual dish. She took it on impulse, patted down the stairs in socks and old sneakers, and opened the metal box at the front of the building. Bills, a coupon flyer, a small padded envelope with a return address that made her pause. Naval Special Warfare Group. Her name and apartment number sat beneath it in block print. She turned the envelope over in her hands, no rattling, no heavy weight like a metal, just a slim shape, something flat. Back upstairs, coffee in hand, she set the envelope on the table and looked at it for a moment. Then she tore it open. A patch slid out, first landing on the wood with a soft slap of fabric. This one was not the wolf. It was a different design, a simple caduceus over cross rifles stitched in subdued colors. Around the edge in a small arc, words had been embroidered. Joint Special Warfare Medical Training. Beneath it lay a single page folded twice. She smoothed it open. Riley. You threw our letter away. Someone at Fleet was offended. I was not. We stood up the academy anyway. We stole most of your teaching points from the packet Janet sent and pretended we thought of them first. The students are standing in fake alleys learning where to put their hands because of you. Thought it was only fair you had our new patch. You do not have to wear it. Just know that some of the people stepping out of birds now have seen your scenarios before they see the real thing. Morales is doing stares like they insulted his mother. He curses your name and then laughs. Rehab says he is ahead of schedule. If you ever want to send us a new story to break their heads over, you know where we are. Respectfully, Rourke. She read it twice. The mention of Janet tugged at her attention. At some point, while the academy letter had sat in her drawer and she had ignored it, someone at the base had called the hospital and asked for her material. She pictured Janet in her office printer humming pages sliding into a box. She picked up the patch. The stitching felt new stiff. The words around the edge were small but clear. She did not pin it anywhere. Not yet. She set it beside the coin instead, the circle of metal and the oval of fabric touching at one edge. The thought of some trainee in a concrete room on the other side of the world repeating moves she had corrected last week on a nurse who was afraid to pick up a laryngoscope settled into her chest like a strange-fitting weight. The worlds were not as separate as they had once been. In the following weeks, the patch stayed on the table most days. Sometimes she slid it into her pocket with the coin when she went to the hospital, two different emblems sitting side by side. Other days she left it at home and forgot it until she saw it again at night. Life folded into its new shape. Her name appeared on the ER schedule in two different colors now. Blue for clinical shifts, green for education blocks. People learned to look for both. One morning an intern stumbled into the education room, eyes red from a bad night. I crashed a tube, he said without preamble. Did everything right and it still went wrong. I cannot stop seeing it. She handed him a pen. Draw it, she said, on the board, every step. Then circle the moment where you wish you had seen something different. He drew, he circled. The circle ended up around a small decision. I let someone else hold the bag, he said. She squeezed too fast. I saw it and did not say anything. I did not want to sound like a jerk. Riley tapped the circle. This is your lesson, she said. Not that you crashed a tube, that you saw something and stayed quiet. Next time you speak, you save the patient and your future self. He nodded, jaw tight. Does this feeling go away if you ask? The boy, he asked, the face in your head. She thought about her own catalog of faces. It fades, she said. It does not vanish. You can use it or you can let it chew on you. Using it hurts less. He wrote that in small letters under his drawing. Use it. Downstairs, the ER continued its erratic dance. Riley watched the seasoned nurses begin to act as if the heart protocol had always existed. They nudged younger staff, pointed at monitors, said things like, if you are seeing that, you do not wait. She watched Klein stop mid-order, once reconsider and say, what would you do if birds in Surrey? Can we... What? To a nurse who had more experience with a type of patient than he did. She watched Briggs appear in the ER more often, standing at the edge of things, taking in the controlled chaos. He asked quieter questions now about flow, about where the bottlenecks actually hurt patients, not just the numbers. One afternoon he approached her while she was restocking a med cart. I had a tour of the education room, he said. Janet is very proud of it. She should be, Riley replied. She keeps half the place from repeating the same mistakes. I saw your scenarios, he said. The kitchen, the parking lot, the back hallway. He paused. I recognize some of those places, he admitted. She slid a tray of syringes into place. They are not secret spots, she said. They are where people live and die when no one is looking. He nodded slowly. I am trying, he said, to see the hospital the way you do, less as a system, more as a series of rooms with people in them. It is both, she said. If you forget either side, something cracks. He smiled thin but real. You know, he said, if you ever get tired of teaching, just here the board would listen to you for the whole network. One hospital at a time, she said. She did not shut the door on the idea completely. She just left it ajar and went back to work. Season shifted. Rainport's endless drizzle gave way to heavier summer storms. The river ran fuller, the park near her apartment filled with children on bikes and teenagers with music leaking from their phones. One evening on her way home in the half-light, Riley passed a small community center with a handmade sign taped to the window. Veteran Story Night. All eras, all branches, listeners welcome. Chairs were visible through the glass, arranged in a loose circle. A pot of coffee steamed on a folding table. Two older men with navy caps spoke quietly near the door. She stopped. For a moment she considered walking in, She imagined taking a seat listening to stories about long-ago ships and faraway wars, maybe adding one of her own, not the classified details, just the human ones. She pictured saying, "I was a medic with a unit that did not officially exist," and watching the small nods of understanding from people who knew what it meant to keep whole chunks of a life off the record. Her hand found the coin in her pocket. She stayed where she was, not tonight. There were some rooms she still approached sideways. Back at her apartment, she opened the drawer under the table. The academy patch lay under a small stack of accumulated paperwork. She lifted it, feeling the fabric give. She took a small magnet from the fridge and pinned the patch to the side of the metal cabinet above her counter. Not on the front where anyone could see it. On the side where it was more for her than for guests. It glowed faintly in the kitchen light, threads catching in a way that made the design look almost three-dimensional. The next morning, she stood in front of a new group of trainees in the education room. Some were fresh faces barely out of school. Others were older, changing specialties. They wore the same mix of nervous and determined that she had seen countless times now. She held up a photo. It was not a war shot. It was a picture of the ER bay during a quiet moment. Empty beds, curtains, half-closed equipment lined in rows. "When it looks like this," she said, "your brain will tell you the danger is low. It is wrong. The danger is the shift from this to chaos in 30 seconds. You do not rise to the occasion when that happens. You rise to the level of your training." She pointed at the board. "We are here to raise that level," she said. "Not for me, for the people who walk in without knowing how bad their day is about to get." A hand went up in the back. "Why do you still work the floor?" one of them asked. "If you are teaching this much, you could be full-time education, right?" She thought of the academy letter in the trash, the offer from Briggs to shape policy, the patch on her kitchen cabinet. "If I stop touching patients," she said, "my teaching will get stale. Skill is like muscle. It wastes if you do not use it." She paused, choosing. "And," she added, "I like being there when it matters." The answer seemed to satisfy them. She flipped to the first slide. "All right," she said. "Scene 1. You are in the grocery store. Someone drops 2 aisles over. Who is with them before EMS?" Hands shot up. Questions followed. They leaned forward. Her stories had become their drills. Their drills would become someone's second chance. At the end of the day, back in the locker room, she found another note tucked into the corner of her mirror. "Nice to have you on the schedule again." She smiled without meaning to. On her way out, passing through the lobby, she heard a child exclaim, "That is her," in a loud whisper. A small boy pointed, eyes wide. His mother hushed him but followed his gaze. Riley recognized the boy with the stapled head wound from weeks before. The staples were gone, replaced by a faint line hidden by new hair. "You all right?" she asked. He nodded hard. "My friends did not believe I had a nurse who fought in a secret war," he said. "I told them you were like a superhero." The words landed oddly on her skin. She crouched to his level. "I'm just a nurse," she said. "And you know that." "Yeah," he said. "That is why it is cool." His mother mouthed a quiet thank you over his head. Riley dipped her chin in acknowledgement. Outside, the air smelled of wet asphalt and something cooking from a food truck parked down the block. Evening light slid between clouds. She walked toward home, the city's sounds rising and falling around her. A distant helicopter crossed the sky. This time she did not look up. The river moved slow and brown under the morning light. Riley jogged along the path that lined its edge, breath missing in the cool air. Her shoes thudded a steady rhythm on the packed gravel. A few other runners passed in the opposite direction, nodding in that brief shared acknowledgement of people awake earlier than they needed to be. Rainport had traded its winter drizzle for a fragile spring. Trees along the bank showed pale green at the tips of their branches. Somewhere out of sight, a dog barked. A flock of geese cut a crooked V across the water, leaving a trail of ripples behind them. Above it all, a helicopter traced a line across the sky. It was small, a news crew or medevac from another hospital. Its rotors made a high, distant whirring. Riley heard it register the sound and let it drift to the edge of her awareness. Her heart rate stayed matched to her pace instead of spiking with old memory. At the corner where the path curved away from the river toward the main road, a group had gathered around a line of folding tables. A banner flapped in the mild breeze. Community Emergency Preparedness Day. Kids clustered around a fire truck. An older man in a volunteer vest handed out pamphlets about disaster kits. On one table, a plastic torso lay on its back chest, exposed ribs outlined. A young paramedic in a dark green shirt demonstrated chest compressions to a teenager in a hoodie. "Harder," though, he said. "Let the chest recoil. You are not going to break him. He's already broken." The teenager pressed down, arms bent. The plastic chest sank a little, not enough. Riley slowed, then stopped, catching her breath as if the stall were just an excuse to rest. "Lock your elbows," she called. The paramedic glanced up. Sweat stood out on his forehead despite the cool air. Mind if I borrow him for a second? She asked, nodding toward the mannequin. Be my guest, he said. Yarkuskamsim, he said. The teenager stepped back. Riley moved in, planted her knees where the grass met the concrete, and placed her hands on the mannequin's sternum. You are doing most of the work with your arms, she told the kid. Let your legs help. Over the chest, shoulders stacked, here. She guided his hands into position, then stepped aside. Like you were trying to push the floor away, she said. He tried again, elbows straight this time. The chest compressed deeper, the springs inside protesting. There, she said, that will move blood. He blew out a breath, half relief. Feels like a lot, he said. It is, she replied. That is the point. The paramedic watched her, head tilted. We had a module on your protocol last month, he said, at county training, the heart one. Good to know they print clearly, she said. They used your name like it has always been there, he told her. Most people did not know it belonged to an actual person. It does, she said. He smiled. I figured, he said, I have seen your name on charts. She left them there, compressing plastic, and continued toward the hospital. Rainport Mercy rose ahead, its glass catching the soft light. The repaired patch of lawn, where the Seahawk had landed, was filling in the line between old grass and new blurred. Inside the lobby smelled faintly of coffee and industrial cleaner. A small display near the fountain had appeared since her last day off. 3 photos printed and framed. On the left, a shot of the hospital during a winter storm snow clinging to the sign. In the middle, a group of nurses laughing in what looked like the break room. On the right, an image from an in-service training Janet at the board writing while a group in scrubs watched. In the corner of the training photo, half out of frame, stood Riley. Only her shoulder and hand were visible, holding a marker. It looked almost accidental, like she had just stepped in to correct something and someone had clicked the picture at that moment. A small plaque under the middle frame read, Patient first always. No name, no speeches, just the words. She took the stairs to the second floor. In the education office, Janet sat with a headset on, facing a screen that showed a classroom full of people in uniforms. The image lagged slightly, audio coming half a second behind their lips. Out in the field, Janet was saying, You will not have a whiteboard. You will have what is in your head, so put the good stuff there now. She saw Riley in the doorway and motioned her in, covering the mic with one hand. They are the first group at the academy using our scenarios, she said. Rourke patched us in. On the screen, a slide appeared with block letters at the top. Scenario parking lot, unknown, assailant chest wound. Underneath the bullet points unrolled. They were Riley's structure cleaned up with Janet's eye for presentation. Want to say hello? Janet asked. Riley shook her head. Let them learn without ghosts watching, she said. Janet smiled and uncovered the mic, diving back into the lesson. Riley stood for another minute, listening to a question from someone off camera. Ma'am, if local policy says wait for orders, but the patient is tanking, which do we follow? Janet did not glance at her. In this context, Janet said, your standing orders empower you to act. You do what preserves life, then you explain. Our consultant on this material has a saying for it. Paperwork is not oxygen. A ripple of laughter came through the speaker, half nervous, half appreciative. Riley left them with that. Downstairs, the ER was in that strange balanced state where it was neither calm nor chaotic. Monitors beeped, but not urgently. Nurses moved briskly, but no one was running. Her name was on the board for both patient care and EDU consult in small letters. She checked in at the nurses' station, scanned the assignment list, and picked up a chart. Room 7? Abdominal pain. Possible appendicitis. In the small curtained space, a teenage girl sat on the edge of the bed, arms wrapped around her middle, eyes tight. It hurts more when they press, the girl said. They are very rude, Riley agreed. Let us see if I can be any more polite. She palpated, gently watched the way the girl flinched, the way the muscles tensed. She listened to her describe the pain in halting words. The work was quiet, methodical. There were no rotors in this story, no special weapons, no codes from another world, just a body that needed someone to pay close attention. Later, after the scan confirmed what she already suspected, after the surgical consult signed off, and the girl rolled away toward an OR with a stuffed animal clutched in her hand, Riley returned to the nurse's station and found a message waiting on a sticky note. Call from Rehab D. Morales. She picked up the nearest phone, punched in the number. He answered on the second ring. You sound less like you are underwater, she said. That is because I'm done with the pool portion of torture, he replied. Now they just have me walking uphill on a treadmill while someone shouts encouragement. Sounds fancy, she said. I am calling with 2 updates, he told her. 1, I can now climb a flight of stairs without cursing you by name, just in general, progress. And 2, she said. 2, some kid in my group today mentioned they trained on a heart protocol scenario last week, he said. He did not know what it meant, so I told him. What did you tell him? She asked. That it means when everything is going sideways and you think there is no time, you still have a choice, he said, and that somewhere in a hospital in Washington there is a nurse who has already made it. She let that sit between them. You are doing all right, she said. Ask me after they add weights, he replied. How are you? Busy, she said, in a good way. Keep it that way, Wade, he said. I like knowing Grey Wolf is stalking the halls of a hospital instead of rooftops. I prefer walking, she said. Semantics, he replied. Stay safe. You too, she said. She hung up and slid the phone back into its cradle. On her next day off, she went back to the river path. The community center had another sign up. CPR class tonight, all welcome. She almost smiled. Evening in Rainport settled in soft. Streetlights blinked on one by one. Cars moved a little slower. The hospital sign glowed against the dimming sky. Inside, the ER continued its uneven pulse. A toddler refused to open his mouth for a throat swab. A woman paced while waiting for lab results. A man sat with his head in his hands, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Riley moved from room to room, hands sure, voice steady. In one corner of the nurse's station, someone had taped a small drawing. Crayon on copy paper. A person in blue with a stethoscope and a cape that looked suspiciously like a sheet. Above it, in unsteady letters. To Nurse Riley from Jaden, you fixed my arm. She stopped long enough to take it in. The cape made her shake her head. The smile on the drawn face matched something she recognized. Before a new patient needed her, she went to the locker room. She opened her locker and for the first time in a long time took the coin out before her shift ended instead of after. She looked at it in the fluorescent light. The edges had lost their sharpness. The engraving had softened from years of being handled. The wolf's eye was almost flat now. The words on the back still stood out. Rescue at all costs. She thought about where she had carried it. War zones, apartments, ambulance bays, education rooms, hallways. It had been a weight, a promise, a thing to grip when noise got too loud or too quiet. She set it on the upper shelf next to the folded photo and the plain canvas bag. It caught a strip of light and sat there still. Her hand hovered for a moment, then moved away. She did not need it in her pocket to remember what it meant. When she stepped back into the corridor, the ambient sound of the ER met her. Monitors, voices, the squeak of a cart, the wheels of a gurney rolling past. At triage, the nurse lifted a hand. Walking short of breath, she said. Looks anxious, vitals borderline. I have it, Riley replied. She walked toward the waiting area where a woman sat on the plastic chair, chest rising too quickly, eyes wide. Riley knelt in front of her, resting her forearms on her own knees so they were at eye level. Hi, she said. I am Riley. Tell me your name. The woman's voice shook as she answered. It feels like I cannot get a full breath, she said. Like something is sitting on me. Thank you for telling me, Riley said. We are going to move to a room where I can listen better. You are not alone in this. She held out her hand. The woman took it. The hallway narrowed for a moment to that grip, the warmth of skin, the transfer of trust. Riley led her inside. The ER did what it always did when the doors opened and new stories stepped through. It expanded to hold them. It tightened to focus on them. Riley moved within it, not above it and not beneath it, a steady point in the shifting current. Her hands were sure. Her voice was clear. Her past and present walked in the same pair of shoes. Outside, somewhere over Rainport, a helicopter cut across the sky, its sound fading into the distance. Inside the room waited for her. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.